Chapter 17:12. Black Magic? Grandpa Chen was shocked. Of course, he had heard of black magic. But wasn't this kind of evil thing usually exclusive to Thailand and other countries? How did Biyao offend someone like that in the capital? Grandpa Chen suppressed his thoughts and hurriedly asked what he was most concerned about. Master, what about my son? Gu Xingyin nodded. After a while, at midnight tonight, I'll perform a spell to see if I can summon his soul back. Old Master Chen's face was filled with gratitude. Thank you, Master. He looked at the time and said, Master, why don't you take a rest first? I'll ask the kitchen to make something to eat. When Gu Xingyin went out, it was close to night. She came over after dinner. Hearing that, she shook her head. But, can you prepare a room for me? I need to rest. Grandpa Chen had no problem with that. In a villa like the Chen family's, there were usually many empty guest rooms. They were cleaned on a daily basis so that guests could stay in them. Gu Xingyin followed Grandpa Chen outside, leaving the white tiger in the room. Grandpa Chen was confused. Gu Xingyin explained, the person behind this might know that I'm here to help young Master Chen. They might come to make trouble tonight. Grandpa Chen's expression turned serious when he heard that. He suddenly remembered what Gu Xingyin had said earlier. He suddenly asked in a low voice, Master, do you know who the person behind this is? Gu Xingyin didn't hide that she knew from the beginning. She nodded straightforwardly. She looked at Grandpa Chen's hesitant expression and suddenly said, Don't ask me who it is. I've already said what I need to say. It's up to you whether you believe me or not. Grandpa Chen was a little confused when he saw Gu Xingyin enter the room. How could he not understand after hearing those words? This master had said those words to Chi-Chi the moment she entered the room. Chi-Chi's reaction was indeed a little strange. Could it be that Chi-Chi was the one who attacked Biyao just like what the master said? Old Master Chen did not want to believe this possibility at all. His biological son and daughter were both his flesh and blood. Before he had concrete evidence, he would never believe that his daughter would do such a crazy thing to her brother. Gu Xingyin entered the room. She sat on the chair and finally relaxed. Although he was still indifferent, he didn't have the cold arrogance that he had in front of old Master Chen. The puppet doll automatically flew out of her pocket. Gu Xingyin looked at him in surprise. What's the matter, baby? Doll looked at her without blinking, then opened its mouth and said clearly, Sleep. Gu Xingyin laughed. I'm not tired. In her opinion, it was probably because she took the initiative to ask for a rest, and the little fellow thought that she was tired. Chen Biyao looked at Gu Xingyin. As a contracted puppet, he knew that the consumption just now was nothing to die in. But when he thought about how she had to perform a ritual for him in the middle of the night, he wanted her to rest more. Thus, Gu Xingyin looked at the little doll in front of her. It seemed that he didn't hear her at all. She repeated, Sleep. Fine. Gu Xingyin helplessly thought that since there was nothing else, she might as well sleep. Chapter 17:13. Unfortunately, she wanted to sleep, but someone didn't allow her. Gu Xingyin was lying on the bed, and the puppet doll was nestled in her neck contentedly. However, someone knocked on the door. Gu Xingyin didn't respond, and the person pushed the door open and came in. Seeing Gu Xingyin like this, ordinary people should know not to continue to disturb her. But the person didn't know this. Chi-Chi looked at Gu Xingyin, who was lying on the bed with a satisfied face, and felt a little angry in her heart. Is this woman purposely going against me? At that time, she had said all kinds of good things, but she was unwilling to help her. But now, she actually agreed to father's request and came to save brother? At this time, Chi-Chi still didn't know that Gu Xingyin was not asked to come by old Master Chen, but she came to do charity for free. If she knew, she would probably vomit blood in anger. Chi-Chi walked to the window and looked at Gu Xingyin in a low voice. Why did you come to the capital? As soon as she said this, Chen Biyao, who was lying on Gu Xingyin's pillow and pretending to be a doll, was shocked. His sister actually knew Diyin? Gu Xingyin even maintained her lying position, and didn't care about Chinchichi's arrival at all. People who didn't respect others couldn't expect to be respected by others. The moment Chinchichi entered the door, she completely returned to her cold persona. Chinchichi was standing, while Gu Xingyin was lying down. But Chinchichi felt that the way Gu Xingyin looked at her was still so arrogant and insufferably arrogant. Gu Xingyin seemed to be standing on a high place and looking down at her coldly. The capital is so big. Can you decide who can and can't come? In Chinchichi's entire life, she had never been treated with such blatant disdain. Because she was the daughter of the Qin family, she was surrounded by friends who knew her family background. Many people took the initiative to get close to and curry favor with her. In the past 2 years, Chinchichi had only felt this kind of look twice. The first time was when Diyin rejected her. The second time, it was still the same person. Chinchichi's expression turned ugly. I don't care why you came to the capital. I spent a lot of money to hire you that day, but you refused to help me. What about now? But now, you're willing to save my brother. Gu Xingyin still looked cold and indifferent. Because you made me unhappy. And now, I'm in a good mood. Chinchichi's face was ashen. She seemed to have realized that it was useless to talk back to the person in front of her. Although the other party was not the quick-witted type, he had the ability to make people gnash their teeth in hatred with every sentence. She came a little closer. I warn you, Dean, she said. It's best that you don't interfere in this matter. Otherwise, you won't be able to protect the little valley and the puppets in the Divine Dragon Mountain Range. Gu Xingyin pursed her lips in boredom. Chinchichi's words and actions were always like this. She would say nice things at the beginning, and then when she realized that the temptation didn't work, she would start to speak harshly. From the beginning to the end, her attitude was so annoying. Gu Xingyin closed her eyes. Instead of worrying about me, you should worry about how to get over your brother's matter. Take care. I won't see you out. Chinchichi was so angry that she wanted to swear. Suddenly, she saw the little doll lying on Gu Xingyin's neck move. Then, it turned its head to look at her expressionlessly. A pair of green eyes stared at her. A cold feeling rose from the bottom of her heart. Chinchichi broke out in a cold sweat. She didn't even dare to say another word. She quickly opened the door and ran out. Chapter 17:14. Chinchichi ran back to her room in one breath. After closing the door tightly, she was still a little scared. She always felt that the terrifying doll's eyes seemed to be haunting her all the time. Even if she couldn't see it now, she still felt that the pair of cold eyes with murderous intent stayed in her mind. She ran to the bed, turned on all the lights in the room, and wrapped herself tightly in the quilt. Then she took out her mobile phone and called the witch doctor, hello, in Gu Xingyin's room. After Chinchichi left, Gu Xingyin grabbed the puppet doll beside the pillow. Who taught you to scare people like this? Although the words were slightly reproachful, everyone could hear the laughter in the tone. The waist of the puppet doll was grabbed by Gu Xingyin. He struggled a few times, but he still couldn't free himself from Gu Xingyin's big palm. Gu Xingyin wanted to let him go at first, but when he saw the fair and tender little dumpling waving his short limbs and struggling in his hand, he suddenly had a bad taste in his mouth. She smiled and looked at the little ball waving his hands and feet. Until the little ball seemed to understand her thoughts, he calmed down and stopped moving. Gu Xingyin laughed out loud. She still lay on the bed, put the little ball on her body, and let go of her hand. Chen Biyao looked at her silently. He felt that he couldn't tell her that the soul in the puppet doll was Chen Biyao. Gu Xingyin looked at the fat ball sitting with a straight face. She couldn't help but smile. Are you angry? Chen Biyao looked at her smile and was stunned. He didn't even hear what she asked clearly. Gu Xingyin looked at the puppet doll's expressionless face. Even its eyes were in a daze. He couldn't help but raise his body slightly and kiss the doll's delicate and cold face. Don't be angry. I'm just kidding. As Gu Xingyin had inherited Dian's memories, he roughly understood that these puppets that could develop self-awareness were no different from ordinary human children in terms of intelligence. They were attached to their creator like family members. That was why Gu Xingyin kissed him. Chen Biyao never thought that he could get such a benefit. He couldn't help but reach out and touch the left side of his face where he was kissed. Fortunately, the puppet couldn't blush. Otherwise, Chen Biyao felt that his face would be burning. Then, Gu Xingyin saw a small figure pouncing on him, and he felt a chill on his face. The puppet doll followed suit and planted a kiss on his face. Gu Xingyin felt that her heart was going to melt. Chen Biyao buried his head in Gu Xingyin's neck and secretly despised himself for pretending to be young. But if he had to choose again, the righteous young master of the Chen family said that he would still kiss her. Gu Xingyin and the puppet doll were in a good mood. On the other side, Chen Qiqi's phone call with the taming master ended. After ending the call, Chen Qiqi's heart calmed down a little. But when she looked at the time, her body reflexively shivered. Ever since she was poisoned by the Yin energy, although the taming master helped her control it, it became harder and harder to control the Yin energy in her body every night. Chapter 17:15. Just like now. Chen Qiqi only felt that the coldness seeping out from the innermost part of her body, from her 5 viscera and 6 bowels, was about to freeze her. She turned the heater in the room to the maximum. Her forehead was sweating because it was hot. But her body was still shivering inside. Before Chen Qiqi had experienced this feeling, she would never have thought that there would be such a way of torturing people in this world. Chen Qiqi, who had experienced it countless times, knew that this was just the beginning. When it was later, the coldness would be worse. At that time, it would be better to die than to live. 11:00. The whole villa of the Chen family was quiet. The servants had gone to bed. Hearing Gu Xingyin's words, old Master Chen didn't tell anyone that he would perform the ritual for his son at midnight. A black shadow quietly appeared at the gate of the Chen family. Then, the shadow passed through the alloy gate that was strong enough to block bullets as if it was a real shadow. Following the darkness, it came to the door of a room on the 2nd floor. According to what he knew, this was Chen Biyao's room. Suddenly, a black shadow appeared in front of the closed door. The room was quiet. There was only a human-shaped bulge on the bed. It was Chen Biyao, the eldest young master of the Chen family, who was sleeping there. The black shadow rushed at Chen Biyao in a very fast way. From the looks of it, it seemed like it was going to crash into his body. Just as it was about to reach the bed, an earth-shattering roar of a tiger suddenly rang in its ears. Then, a strong suction force came from behind. The white fox swallowed the black shadow in one gulp. Puff! In an apartment not far from the Chen family, the tame headmaster, whose head was full of official inscriptions, changed his expression and spat out a mouthful of blood. The opponent is too strong, he seemed to have a premonition. He forced his injured body to pack up the things in the room and went out. No one in the Chen family's villa was awakened. Those who should be asleep were asleep. Those who couldn't sleep were waiting for the arrival of midnight. Except for the black shadow, no one else seemed to have heard the earth-shattering roar of the tiger. 11:30. Gu Xingyin's door was gently knocked. She turned on the light and got up to open the door. As expected, the person standing outside was Old Master Chen, who was neatly dressed. Old Master Chen was still dressed the same way he did during the day. He looked very energetic. Obviously, he was one of the people who couldn't sleep that night. Sorry to disturb you, Master. It's just that the time is coming and I'm very nervous. Old Master Chen didn't lie about his feelings at all. When his eldest son, Chen Biyao, had been in a coma for so long, he had looked for countless masters. But every time his hope had been ignited, it had been extinguished by the ruthless reality. This time, no matter what, at least this grandmaster was more trustworthy than the previous ones. Gu Xingyin said faintly, I can understand the affection between father and son. Let's go. She walked into Chen Biyao's room. When she turned on the light, she suddenly said, by the way, not long ago, someone tried to attack the person in bed. Old Master Chen was shocked. Biyao was already in such a state, yet there were still people who didn't want to let him go? No, it was very likely that someone knew that he might wake up, so they couldn't wait to make a move before that happened. Old Master Chen's heart turned cold. How many people knew about this today? Chapter 17:16. Old Master Chen closed his eyes tightly, not allowing himself to think about that possibility. When his eldest son woke up, a trace of coldness flashed across his eyes. Those who did something wrong had to pay the price. Gu Xingyin walked to Chen Biyue's bed. She looked at the pale man. He was not dead, which meant that his soul was still alive in some corner of this world. As long as his soul was still alive, she was confident that she could pull him back. She turned around. "Mr. Chen, please stay away from me." White tiger. The white tiger howled to show that it understood. It followed Old Master Chen to a corner. Its master asked it to protect Old Master Chen. Gu Xingyin did not need to do much preparation. She cut her middle finger and dripped a drop of blood on Chen Biyue's forehead. Strangely enough, when the blood landed on Chen Biyue's forehead, it didn't move and automatically condensed into a round and smooth blood bead. It was as if a cinnabar mole had grown in the middle of that person's forehead. Contrasting with his pale skin, there was a strange and bewitching beauty to it. Then Gu Xingyin picked up one of Chen Biyue's hands and used her fingernails to cut the tip of his middle finger, squeezing out a drop of blood. The drop of blood fell on Gu Xingyin's palm and did not dissipate. Instead, it turned into a small crimson blood bead and rolled around. Gu Xingyin sat cross-legged on the floor. She threw the blood bead into the air. The blood bead fell to Gu Xingyin's head and stopped falling. It was as if it was imprisoned in the air by some mysterious force and kept spinning. Gu Xingyin started to close her eyes and murmured something softly. Old Master Chen listened and felt that the words were very obscure. He could not understand. As he listened, he felt that his vision was a little blurry and his mind started to feel dizzy. At this moment, he suddenly felt a pain in his hand. Old Master Chen woke up and realized that the white tiger beside him had bitten him. However, it obviously knew its limits and did not bite through his skin. Knowing that it was helping him, Old Master Chen thanked it. White Tiger let out a low roar. Old Master Chen realized that he couldn't hear anything. He looked towards Gu Xingyin's direction and saw that the small pearl on her head was emitting rings of red light. The faint blood-red light rippled outwards, spreading to an unknown distance. Gu Xingyin knew. As long as she wanted to, this light could cover all the places that her spiritual consciousness could reach. As long as Chen Biyue's soul was within this range, it would be drawn back here by his blood. Her pockets suddenly moved. However, Gu Xingyin, who was in a meditative state, could not see it. Old Master Chen looked strangely at the white and fat doll that came out of the master's pocket. He didn't know that this was a puppet, and he found it strange. Could it be that the Grand Master's child was so different from the rest? Aren't you afraid that you won't be able to breathe if you keep it in your pocket? Then, he was surprised to find that the little doll, which was only the size of his hand, was flying. Old Master Chen silently retracted his previous thoughts. If the Grand Master's child could fly, what was so strange about raising it in her pocket? Chen Biyue floated in midair. At this moment, he could already feel the strong calling from his body. The doll's body suddenly started to tremble violently. Gu Xingyin seemed to have sensed something and opened her eyes in confusion. Chapter 17:17. She looked at the puppet doll not far away from her. It seemed to be experiencing some kind of pain, and its face was distorted. Old Master Chen looked at this scene worriedly. He couldn't hear anything, so he didn't understand what was going on. Of course, even if he could hear, he wouldn't know what was going on. Gu Xingyin had a vague guess. Her incantation stopped in its tracks. Those blood-red lights were meant to find Chen Biyue's spirit, but it seemed like there was no need for that now. The blood droplet above her head suddenly turned into a blur and flew straight towards the puppet doll's forehead in midair. The droplet of blood seeped into the puppet doll's forehead and disappeared under its skin. Gu Xingyin suddenly stood up. When she saw this scene, what else did she not know? It turned out that the eldest young master of the Qin family had been by her side all this time. She stood up and stared at the puppet doll, who seemed to be in extreme pain. Although Chen Biyue's mind was occupied by the tearing pain in his body, he kept a part of his attention on Gu Xingyin. He saw Gu Xingyin stand up and look at him. Her expression changed from one of worry to one of understanding, and finally to one of calmness. At that moment, he actually panicked. After all, he had been with Gu Xingyin for such a long time, and he had a certain understanding of her personality. This person was naturally cold-hearted. If he wasn't her puppet, he wouldn't even be able to get a glance from her, right? Furthermore, he definitely couldn't let her know that he had memories of the time he spent with her. Chen Biyue could only think of this. Soon, he couldn't think of anything else. Because it was just too painful. It was the kind of living thing that separated one's soul from the puppet body that one was used to. At this moment, White Tiger also removed the restrictions on Old Master Chen's body. Old Master Chen looked at the scene in front of him in a daze. He looked at Gu Xingyin, Grandmaster, what's going on? Gu Xingyin glanced sideways at him and said faintly, your son's soul accidentally entered the puppet I refined. Now, it's being separated from the puppet's body. Old Master Chen's eyes widened. Didn't they say that their son was bewitched? How did he become a puppet? However, there was an even greater worry in his heart that he didn't voice out. Then, Grandmaster, will Biyao be alright? Gu Xingyin shook her head. Don't worry, it's just some pain. Once his soul is free, I'll find a way to let him return to his body. When the time comes, you can go find a righteous Dao Xian sect sorcerer and ask for a soul-subduing talisman for him. After a period of time, there will be no problem. Old Master Chen was relieved when he heard this. It didn't take long. 12 o'clock midnight sharp. The puppet doll in midair suddenly began to emit wisps of black mist, spreading towards the surroundings. The temperature in the room instantly dropped. Gu Xingyin said in a low voice, stay away. Old Master Chen hurriedly retreated. Gu Xingyin reached out with her left hand. The black mist that was spreading outward seemed to have found a target and rushed towards her body. Old Master Chen could clearly see that Gu Xingyin's long black hair had already condensed into a large patch of white frost. Chapter 17-18. He looked at it worriedly, but he knew that he could not help at all. Slowly, the black weapons dissipated. At the same time, the pain on the puppet doll's face disappeared. In Gu Xingyin's sight, he could see a transparent white halo coming out of the puppet doll's body. The halo did not move after leaving the puppet doll's body. It just floated in the air quietly. It was also at that moment that Gu Xingyin's heart trembled. The contract between her and the puppet doll was broken. She looked at the white halo. Although she could not guess its direction, she could feel that it was staring at her. Well, she said coldly, now, you can go back to your body. The ball of light didn't move. Gu Xingyin raised his hand and waved his sleeve gently. The white ball of light flew uncontrollably toward Chen Biyue's body and sank into his body. Old Master Chen heard Gu Xingyin talking to the void just now. He couldn't see anything, but he could roughly guess that there was something there. He asked carefully, Master Dean, what was that? Gu Xingyin said, your son's soul has returned to his body. As she spoke, she walked forward and stretched out a hand to feel Chen Biyue's glabella. With a frown, Gu Xingyin reached out his hand and took out a small puppet from his bag. The puppet was very small, about the size of a human thumb. There was a lifelike beast carved on it. Grandpa Chen felt that the beast was familiar, but he could not recognize it. Gu Xingyin did not want to explain it to him. She gave the thing to Chen Xiaoya. Chen Xiaoya's soul will not be stable these days. You can put this under his pillow or hang it on his neck. He will wake up after 3 days. He can't leave this thing for 10 days. Grandpa Chen remembered it all. At this moment, a "Kacha" sound suddenly came from the room. Grandpa Chen and Gu Xingyin looked over at the same time. The puppet doll in the air started to crack from its forehead to its whole body. Then it fell down and shattered into pieces. Grandpa Chen could not help but take a big step back. In his eyes, the puppet doll looked just like a real baby. When he saw this scene, he really couldn't accept it. Gu Xingyin said lightly, "It's just a puppet." As she spoke, she slowly walked over, bent down, and placed a clean handkerchief on the ground. Then, she picked up all the shards one by one. Old Master Chen's fearful expression suddenly froze. He looked at Gu Xingyin's movements. She was so careful and cherishing it. In hindsight, he realized that this doll was probably very precious to the puppet master in front of him. But because of Biyao, the doll became like this. Grandpa Chen sighed. He was not a saint. He could not run to Gu Xingyin and say some kind words. Even if he knew that he had to pay a price for his son's return, he would still do it. He just walked up to Gu Xingyin and said in a low voice, "The Chen family will never forget Master's great kindness. If there's anything you need in the future, the Chen family will not hesitate to help." Chapter 17-19. Gu Xingyin carefully wrapped the pieces she picked up and put them into her backpack. She got up and turned to Old Master Chen, saying, "I told you that I decided to save your son because I'm in a good mood. If I'm in a bad mood, I won't look back even if your son dies immediately. So, you don't have to thank me." Old Master Chen was still smiling. "Although it's a piece of cake for you, it's a life-saving grace for the Chen family. The Chen family will never be ungrateful people." His words made Gu Xingyin secretly admire him. But on the surface, she just said coldly, "It's up to you." She called the white tiger and turned to walk to the window. Old Master Chen shouted behind her, "Master, it's getting late. You should rest for the night and tomorrow." The rest of his words disappeared in his throat. Old Master Chen looked at the strangely dressed puppet master sitting on the white tiger. The man and the tiger leaped toward the window and disappeared. He hurriedly looked out of the window. He saw that the white tiger had landed safely. After a few leaps, the man's figure could no longer be seen. He was indeed a weird-tempered master. The next day, Gu Xingyin bought a plane ticket back to her valley. Since the matter here had been solved, there was no need for her to stay. As for Chinchichi, when Gu Xingyin left the capital, she secretly gave her a small gift. In the original plot, she burned Dean to death with fire. In this life, Gu Xingyin would let her have a taste of the same feeling. But it was not fire, but ice. She planted the seed of evil in Chinchichi's body. As long as she wanted, she could take Chinchichi's life at any time and make her suffer a fate worse than death. But she was not in a hurry. Gu Xingyin still wanted to see how the Chen family would deal with the woman who dared to kill her own brother. Chinchichi could no longer cause any trouble. Gu Xingyin listened to the system's words. The taming master probably knew that the opponent was too powerful and was afraid that he would be implicated. He had already run out of the imperial capital that very night. Thinking of this, Gu Xingyin sneered, Chinchichi even found such an unreliable man. Abandoning his woman at the critical moment was not something an ordinary man could do. Thinking about it, the taming master and Chinchichi were just cooperating with each other. It was obviously unrealistic to expect people like them to die for others. 3 days later. A refreshing breeze blew in through the open window. The curtains moved slightly. The man's eyelashes. Chin Chen's mind was in a mess. He felt like he had a very strange dream. The dreamland was grotesque and variegated, filled with all sorts of inconceivable things. Ugh! He hugged his head and moaned in pain. Old Master Chen, who stayed in his son's room most of the time, thought that he was hallucinating. He suddenly turned to look at his son. Sure enough, he saw that the eyes that had been closed for more than a month trembled a few times and opened. Biyao. Old Man Chen's voice trembled. His eyes turned red at this moment. Chen Biyao was still not used to the sudden bright environment. He paused for a while before calling out, "Dad." After saying that, Chen Biyao realized that his voice was abnormally hoarse. "What's wrong with me?" 3 chapters first. See you later. It's almost the end of the month. If you have a monthly ticket, give me a ticket. Chapter 17-20. Grandpa Chen hurriedly helped him to sit up. Only then did Chen Biyao realize that his body was completely soft and had no strength at all. Just this small movement of getting up made his head dizzy. Grandpa Chen poured a cup of warm water that he had prepared for a long time and handed it over. Chen Biyao took it and drank it. It was a little salty. Obviously, he had thought about his body and added something. After slowly drinking the cup of water, Chen Biyao sorted out his messy thoughts. Grandpa Chen just looked at him and waited for him to slowly come to his senses. Chen Biyao recalled his previous memories. That morning, he suddenly felt his vision go black and then he lost consciousness. Later, he seemed to be in a gray place. He couldn't see anything and couldn't come into contact with anyone. Later, his expression was a little blank. The only thing he remembered was the pain that seemed to tear his soul apart, but he couldn't remember anything else. What exactly did he experience? Old Master Chen looked at his son's blank expression. He was afraid that this experience would damage his memory, so he quickly asked, "What's wrong?" He hurriedly asked, "Biyao, do you still remember what happened before?" Chen Biyao replied, "I remember that on the morning of the 14th, I was preparing to go to the company, then." He didn't say anything else. But Grandpa Chen knew what happened next. He had just returned from his morning exercise when he heard that the family was in chaos. He heard that the young master had fainted. At that time, they all thought that Chen Biyao was under too much pressure at work. However, after he was sent to the hospital, the doctor couldn't find anything wrong with him. Grandpa Chen didn't believe it. He went to several hospitals and found all kinds of experts, but still couldn't find the reason for Chen Biyao's condition. It wasn't until later that Grandpa Chen started to come into contact with some metaphysical masters that he realized that his eldest son might have been plotted against. Thinking of this, he was silent for a moment and suddenly asked, "Biyao, do you know who is targeting you this time?" Chen Biyao looked up at his father. The moment he heard this sentence, the name of his sister, Chen Qiqi, flashed across his mind. Then, he turned back time. The day before he fainted, when he came back from work, he happened to see his sister enter his room. At that time, he thought it was strange and asked Chen Qiqi what she was doing. How did Chen Qiqi reply at that time? Her expression was a little unnatural. She forced a smile and said, "Well, I don't have anything to do today, so I came to see if you need me to help clean up." Now that he thought about it, this sentence was full of holes. There were servants in charge of cleaning the house. Why would he need Chen Qiqi? But at that time, he didn't care so much and just smiled and refused. He hesitated for a moment. Old Master Chen saw that he didn't speak, so he suddenly asked, "Is it Qiqi?" Chen Biyao looks up in surprise. "Dad, why do you say that?" Old Master Chen's face was a little cold. "Your condition was cured by a master." That master almost said clearly who was behind all of this. Master? Chen Biyao frowned. Why couldn't he remember anything? He felt that he must have forgotten something important in his mind. However, that area was dusky, and as soon as he got close, he felt a stabbing pain in his head. Chapter 17:21. He couldn't help but cover his forehead with his hand. Seeing his son like this, Old Master Chen was a little flustered. "What's wrong? Does your head hurt?" Chen Biyao shook his head. He found that as long as he didn't think about that, he wouldn't feel that tingling sensation. So, what did he forget? He asked, "What's wrong? Why don't I know anything about it?" Hearing this, Old Master Chen explained, "I don't know either. I only know that the master is called Di'in. She's a puppet master." Di'in. Puppet master. When Chen Biyao heard these two names, a pale and delicate face flashed before his eyes. Right. She was Di'in. How could she be? Apart from her appearance, Chen Biyao couldn't remember anything else. Chen Biyao had already made a decision in his heart, "I'm going to find her." Old Master Chen was still saying. "This master came looking for you himself. After treating you, he left." Chen Biyao nodded. He remembered the topic that the father and son had talked about before. "Dad, call Qiqi over," Chen Biyao said. Old Master Chen's expression froze. But after a moment, he didn't say anything and left with his cane. When he came in again, apart from Old Master Chen and Chinchichi, a middle-aged man in a suit and leather shoes followed behind him. He was the butler that the father and son trusted the most. Chinchichi was very nervous when she entered the door, because she knew that her brother was awake. Generally speaking, people with ulterior motives would be worried about all kinds of things. For example, Chinchichi felt that her brother already knew the truth. When her brother woke up, it would be the time for her to be exposed. In fact, to a certain extent, she was right. Chen Biyao looked straight at Chinchichi. His gaze made Chinchichi very uncomfortable. Chinchichi shrank a little. She tried to calm herself down and said to Chen Biyao with a smile, "Brother, you're finally awake." She didn't get a response from Chen Biyao. Chen Biyao still stared at her and said in a hoarse voice, "Chinchichi, I think I'm a qualified brother. Why did you do such a thing?" Chinchichi panicked. "Brother, what are you talking about? What is it? Did you misunderstand something?" Old Master Chen also looked at his daughter. He hoped more than anyone else that Chinchichi did not do this. Chen Biyao only said coldly, "Don't quibble anymore. Chinchichi, I know your deal with that tame headmaster, and even your conversation. You won't even let your own brother off. You're really heartless." Chinchichi shuddered. He even knew about black magic masters? As expected, as long as Chen Biyao didn't die, nothing could be hidden. Her panicked expression suddenly calmed down. Chinchichi looked coldly at Chen Biyao and Grandpa Chen. She said coldly, "Yes. Chen Biyao, I had someone cast black magic on you." Although Old Master Chen was mentally prepared, he still couldn't help but sway when he heard his daughter admit it. This evil creature. Chinchichi probably felt that she had already been exposed, so she didn't have to hold back anymore. She looked at Old Master Chen. There was no longer any admiration or worship in her eyes. Instead, it was slowly filled with resentment. Resentment. Old Master Chen realized that his daughter actually hated him. Chapter 17:22. Chinchichi said coldly, "I know that in other people's eyes, I'm the spoiled daughter of the Chen family. I wear big brands and live in villas." Her eyes were filled with disdain. "But what's the use of that? Because I'm a daughter, because I'm the youngest, this huge Chen family won't be mine in the future. Compared to those huge assets, what I've enjoyed is nothing." Chen Biyao's voice was calm. "So you're unwilling to give up and want to kill your own brother?" He had always been in Chinchichi's eyes. When he said that, Chinchichi panicked. But soon, she had nothing to lose. "Yes. As long as you're dead, I'll be the only heir of the Chen family. So what if Dad doesn't like me? The Chen family can only be left to me. I will let him see that this daughter of mine is no worse than you, her big brother." Pfft. Chen Biyao snorted in disdain. Chinchichi narrowed her eyes. "What do you mean? Chen Biyao, are you looking down on me like my dad?" She raised her voice. "What's there to be proud of? Chen Biyao, you were just born a few years earlier than me. You're a man who can carry on the family line. If I were in your position, I could do the same. Do you believe me?" Chen Biyao didn't respond to her. Instead, it was Old Master Chen who spoke. His voice was steady. "You're wrong, Chichi." Chinchichi's eyes trembled. Old Master Chen said, "The Chen family has never chosen an heir based on age or gender. Have you forgotten your grandmother?" Chinchichi turned her face away, unwilling to believe it. Old Master Chen continued, "Do you remember the 10 million I gave you when you were 18? Chinchichi finally looked up. Old Master Chen looked at her. "I remember that you used it to buy a sports car and used the rest to buy bags and big brands. You went out with your friends. But you know, when your brother was 18, I gave him 10 million too." Chinchichi seemed to realize something and her face paled. Sure enough, Old Master Chen's next words made her fall into a daze. At that time, your brother used this 10 million to invest with a few of his friends to establish the current Imperial Valley Hotel. The Imperial Valley Hotel was a famous 5-star hotel chain in the country. There were 2 of them in the capital alone, and they could be found in the bustling areas of every provincial capital. Old Master Chen sighed. Have you always thought that the Imperial Valley under your brother's name was left to him by me? You're wrong. That's the result of his hard work. And you, Chi-Chi, your starting point is the same. Chi-Chi couldn't help but take 2 steps back. She suddenly said to Old Master Chen, "Why didn't you tell me, Dad? I thought it was just my birthday present. Who knows what kind of stupid test it is?" Old Master Chen's expression was calm. "Yes, this is just one of the tests. Let me tell you again. When you are 20 years old, I will let you." Chi-Chi never knew that ever since she became an adult, the seemingly casual things that her father asked her to do were actually tests set up by the family for the future successor. She, on the other hand, had completely and utterly lost. After Old Master Chen finished speaking, he looked at her quietly. "This was not a decision made by me alone. The entire Chen family watched. Chi-Chi, it's not that I'm biased, but the more power you have, the more responsibility you have to bear." 6 chapters. There were still updates, but whether it was 8 or 10,000 today depended on the situation. Chapter 1723. Chi-Chi, who was in a daze, was brought back to her room by the housekeeper. The father and son fell into silence. After a long while, Grandpa Chen spoke first. "Biyao, what do you plan to do?" Biyao said, "Dad, you know my character." He raised his head without any expression on his face. "It's not about what I want to do, but, can you accept Chi-Chi?" Grandpa Chen sighed. Biyao knew in his heart that when his father asked this question, he had already expressed his attitude. If he didn't care and let Biyao do whatever he wanted, he wouldn't have probed like this. Grandpa Chen was silent for a long time before he finally said, "I only have you and your sister in my life. When your mother left, she told me to take good care of you." Biyao didn't speak when Grandpa Chen mentioned his mother who had passed away. Grandpa Chen waited for a long time before his son spoke. "I know." Grandpa Chen said in a low voice, "I'm sorry about this. I know it's unfair to you." Biyao shook his head. "There's no such thing as fairness in this kind of thing." Grandpa Chen got up and said, "Have a good rest. Don't think about anything during this period of time. Focus on getting your body back." Biyao nodded. After Grandpa Chen left, Biyao slowly lay down. He thought a lot. Chi-Chi's matter, his family's matter, and the mysterious puppet master. The last one was like a forbidden zone for Biyao. The only thing he knew was her appearance. It seemed to be deeply engraved in his mind. But other than that, Biyao couldn't think of anything else related to her. Wait until everything is over here. He was going to find her. Gu Xingyin was quite happy during this period of time. She returned to her small valley, bought a car, and bought a lot of things. In this way, Gu Xingyin comforted herself that she lived in a mountain villa. Her puppets had been summoned back by her. After all, Chi-Chi probably didn't want to take revenge on her anymore. She asked the system to monitor the Chen family situation at all times. After Biyao woke up, he only spent the first month recuperating. Afterwards, he slowly began to move. Chi-Chi was under his control in the Chen family. Her phone, computer, and other electronic devices were all monitored. Chi-Chi had no way of contacting the outside world. The next step was to take out those who were ready to make trouble and teach them a lesson. When he regained control of the Chen family, Biyao finally put Chi-Chi's matter on the table. He couldn't lock Chi-Chi up at home for the rest of her life. Biyao's actions during this period of time made Grandpa Chen very satisfied. His son's methods were ruthless and experienced, completely unlike a young man in his 20s. With the Chen family in his hands, there was no need to worry about the future. In the end, the punishment for Chi-Chi came out. She was sent abroad and given a large sum of money, enough for her to live a luxurious life abroad. The only condition was that he had to live under Chen Biyue's control for the rest of his life, and unless Chen Biyue changed his mind, he was not allowed to return to the country. This was equivalent to a different form of house arrest. Chapter 1724. Of course, Chen Qiqi was dissatisfied. But no matter how dissatisfied she was, it was useless. Her father, who had always doted on her, shut his mouth. And her brother didn't say anything at all. Chen Biyue even said, "This is the best future I can give you. Chen Qiqi, don't forget that what you want is my life." Chen Qiqi looked at her brother's cold side profile and suddenly understood. The sibling relationship between her and him had been broken after what she had done. She didn't say anything more. She packed her things and chose to leave. She completely understood that if she didn't leave, what awaited her wouldn't be a good place. Chen Biyue listened to his subordinates report that Chen Qiqi had successfully arrived at the place he had arranged. He told old Master Chen. He said in a low voice, "If you can't bear to part with her, you can visit her in the future." Even so, he didn't mention anything about changing his mind. However, old Master Chen shook his head and said, "No, it's better for her to bear the consequences of her own mistakes. Let her come back and kowtow to me when I'm 100 years old." Chen Biyue was silent. Spend the rest of her life in luxury? Gu Xingyin silently watched the Chen family's handling of the matter. She could understand. After all, Chen Qiqi was the Chen family's blood relative. It would be unreasonable if she really used any extreme means. However, old Master Chen and Chen Biyue were Chen Qiqi's blood relatives, so she could be forgiven for anything. Gu Xingyin wasn't, and neither was Dean. On the first night of Chen Qiqi's new home, she couldn't sleep because of the cold. The next day, she went to the doctor in a mess and told them what had happened to her, but no one believed her, because there was nothing wrong with the test results. The news spread to the Chen family on the other side of the ocean. Even old Master Chen only thought that his daughter was playing tricks to come back. For the first time, Chen Qiqi experienced what it was like to have no one to turn to for help. However, this was just the beginning. From that night onwards, every night, from midnight onwards, she would fall into that terrible feeling. She seemed to see her naked body surrounded by ice shackles. The piercing cold seeped into her limbs and bones, freezing her flesh and freezing her cells to death. The numbness and dull pain slowly eroded her body. When she woke up the next morning, Chen Qiqi even thought that she was dead. She went to the hospital like a madwoman, but the result was the same. Later, she stopped going to the hospital and went to the nearby church to pray, asking the priest to save her. However, it was useless. Every night, she felt like she would experience death. In just a short span of 10 days, Chen Qiqi woke up numbly one morning and was shocked to find that her hair had turned white. The woman in the mirror had a numb expression, lifeless eyes, and pale skin. She looked like a woman in her 30s. Was that really her? Chen Qiqi felt like she was going crazy. Gu Xingyin just looked on coldly. Since he had such thoughts, he had to be prepared to bear the consequences. Otherwise, how would Chen Qiqi know how those who died by her hands felt when they died? This was a verdant valley. Chen Biyue was wearing simple casual clothes, looking at the dense forest in a daze. He had asked a lot of people about it, and with his amazing intuition, he finally found this place. Would she really be here? Chapter 1725. Chen Biyue walked through the forest. Gu Xingyin, who had never paid special attention to non-mission targets, did not notice that someone had found this place. She was sitting on the grass in front of the small wooden house, with a piece of cloth spread out in front of her. On it was the broken puppet doll. Gu Xingyin was a little distressed. With the puppet doll in this state, it seemed that there was only one way left, to refine it again. Anyway, this doll had no consciousness of its own. Gu Xingyin was still a little sad when she thought of this. She really liked the doll that liked to stick to her. No wonder she felt that the doll was very smart. It turned out that it was not a consciousness condensed by a normal spirit at all. It was originally a normal human being. How could a human who once had normal thinking not be smart? Gu Shengyin was lost in her thoughts when her expression suddenly changed. Someone was coming. When Chen Biyue walked here, he saw two very unique buildings among the trees and flowers at a glance. One was a small wooden house. The structure of the small wooden house was similar to a normal house, but the outside was plated with a layer of red material. A completely red house was placed in the middle of a mountain forest where few people would go. The other building was even stranger. From Chen Biyue's experience, it looked very much like the tent-like buildings commonly used by nomads. This building was completely opposite to the wooden house on the side. Every part of it was silver white. The color and brightness of the building were as if the outer layer was plated with a layer of silver. He did not see anyone. But Chen Biyue knew that he was not in the wrong place. He could not suppress the excitement in his heart and continued to walk forward. He wanted to see the master who was said to have saved his life. He wanted to figure out why he was so obsessed with her. Before he got close to the house, he was suddenly blocked by a person who suddenly appeared from the grass. There was someone else here? Chen Biyue was about to speak when he took a closer look and realized that the person in front of him was not a real person at all. She had the height of an ordinary person, and her appearance was lifelike. If he did not look carefully, he really could not tell that she was not a real person. However, if one were to take a closer look, one would be able to tell that no matter how lifelike the puppet was, it was still lacking in agility compared to a real person. Their eyes would never focus, and their expressions would never change. That is, unless their master gave them special instructions. Strangers are forbidden from approaching. The puppet suddenly spoke. His tone was a little stiff, as if something was grinding on a piece of wood, without the slightest hint of emotion. Chen Biyue was surprised and cooperatively took 2 steps back. I'm Chen Biyue. I'm here to thank Master Dian for saving my life. No one responded to him. Chen Biyue didn't give up. He continued to shout, I'm Chen Biyue. I'm here to thank Master Dian for saving my life. Gu Shengyin was listening in the room. Just as she was about to ask them to leave, she suddenly paused. She looked in the direction of the sound. There was a thick wall blocking her view, but at that moment, her gaze seemed to penetrate all obstacles and landed on the person outside the house. Gu Shengyin raised his eyebrows in surprise when he saw it. It's actually him? Chapter 1726. After Chen Biyue shouted the second time, he was about to shout the third time. He saw that the red wooden hut on the left had opened by itself. A black figure appeared at the door. Chen Biyue looked over subconsciously and was suddenly stunned. Countless memories flooded into his mind and drowned him. From the moment he opened his mouth to the end. Gu Shengyin saw that the man was just staring at her blankly. She couldn't help but smile. Oh? How do you want to repay me? Chen Biyue came back to his senses because of this sentence. He walked towards the wooden hut step by step. This time, the puppet didn't stop him. His face was calm, but his heart was beating fast. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. He walked until he was in front of Gu Shengyin. Gu Shengyin also didn't expect that the person she wanted to save to complete the task would be her lover. Chen Biyue had already walked to Gu Shengyin. But he didn't stop. Instead, he continued to take a step forward. His whole body was in contact with Gu Shengyin's body. Then, he reached out and hugged her in his arms. How about I give myself to you? When Chen Biyue said this, he was actually prepared to be rejected. He knew that his behavior was a little rash. But the moment his memory was suddenly restored, he couldn't suppress the desire that spread from the bottom of his heart. He was willing to follow his heart. However, Gu Shengyin didn't push him away. A minute later, Chen Biyue, who realized this, was ecstatic. He tightened his arms until Gu Shengyin complained that he was too tight and made her uncomfortable. Let go. My arm hurts. Chen Biyue smiled and loosened some of his strength. But he didn't listen to Gu Shengyin's words and let go of his arms. I'm so happy, Dean. I'm so happy. I thought you would refuse, Gu Xingyin looked up at his silly face and said with disdain, "Speak properly, or I will doubt my taste." Chen Biyao immediately straightened his posture. His expression returned to its usual calmness, but there was a satisfied smile on his face. It could be said to be one of the proudest things in life when the person you like also likes you. He spent several months with Gu Xingyin in the forest and knew that the Qin family in the capital kept urging him to go back. "Are you willing to accompany me to the capital?" Chen Biyao asked. Gu Xingyin shook her head without hesitation. Dean was not suitable to stay in a big city with a lot of people. She was born in this forest and grew up in this forest. Her future also belonged to this forest. Chen Biyao didn't seem surprised by this result. He stayed with Gu Xingyin for a few more days. Then one day, he said goodbye to Gu Xingyin. "Dian, I have some matters to attend to and need to return to the capital for a while." He did not hide it from her. He was the heir of the Qin family, and he had a burden that he couldn't get rid of. Gu Xingyin understood very well. A man would always have things that he couldn't give up, such as responsibilities and career. She liked him, so she couldn't restrain him in the name of so-called love. But, 5 years. This is the time I give you. She looked at Chen Biyao. After 5 years, you don't have to come here again. A woman was willing to support her lover for love. But she shouldn't sacrifice her whole life for the so-called love. Chen Biyao looked at Gu Xingyin for a long time and nodded. Okay. Chapter 1727. Chen Biyao left. There was no sadness in their parting. Gu Xingyin sent Chen Biyao out of the valley as if he was an old friend. After that, she deliberately did not allow the system to pay attention to Chen Biyao's news. She lived her life alone as usual. Occasionally, she would accept 1 or 2 people's requests and use her identity as a puppet master to do something for them. However, this time, not only did Gu Xingyin act according to his mood, he would also decide whether to help the person based on their request. A year later, her reputation was growing in a certain circle. Compared to her previous reputation of being evil and ruthless, it was much better. She refined the puppet doll again. The new puppet doll looked exactly the same as the previous one. Gu Xingyin also gathered countless Yin spirits and dripped her blood on it. However, this puppet doll didn't have its own consciousness like the previous one. It was just an ordinary puppet. At most, it was slightly more powerful than the other puppets. After that, another year passed. One day, Gu Xingyin woke up and saw the puppet doll sitting up on its own without her command. When it saw Gu Xingyin, it did not even know how to walk. Instead, it used all 4 of its limbs to crawl towards her. Its eyes were full of admiration. Gu Xingyin was caught off guard by this surprise. She had given the puppet doll the name Jojo. She had hoped that it would accompany her forever. Another year passed. Chinchichi, who was far away on the other side of the ocean, finally could not bear the price of living in this world. One day, she wore her favorite dress and put on her most exquisite makeup. Then, she walked to a bridge in a foreign city and jumped off. She died on the spot. When Gu Xingyin heard this news, she did not think much of it. Didn't Chinchichi know that people who died in this way, no matter how beautifully they dressed up, would only see a bloody mess in the end? No matter what, Chinchichi's death meant that Gu Xingyin's mission was completed. When the deciduous trees in the valley sprouted new buds again, Gu Xingyin, who was collecting all kinds of materials in the forest, suddenly felt something. She straightened up and asked the system, "Is he here?" The system replied, "Yes, host." Gu Xingyin reached out her hand to cover her heart. She thought that after experiencing so many worlds, she was able to face anything with a heart as calm as still water. But when they heard the news, they jumped very quickly. In the end, she still couldn't transcend. After summoning the white tiger, Gu Xingyin headed towards her residence. From afar, she saw the man standing in front of her wooden house. It was exactly the same as when he stood in front of the wooden house 3 years ago. Hearing the tiger's roar, Chen Biyao turned around. He looked at the cold and beautiful black-robed woman on the white tiger's back and smiled. Then, He reached out his arm and caught the body that jumped into his arms. He hugged her tightly, as if he had filled all the emptiness in the past 3 years. I'm just a jobless person now. Dean has to take care of me, he said with a light smile. Gu Xingyin raised her eyebrows. Okay, serve me well and I'll take care of you for a lifetime. Their fingers intertwined together for a lifetime. Chapter 1728. As a puppeteer, Dean's lifespan was much longer than Chen Biyue's. After Chen Biyue left, Gu Xingyin buried him in a place with beautiful scenery. Then, he made a grave for himself beside Chen Biyue and laid in it. The last order she gave to White Tiger and Jiao was to fill up the hole in her coffin. When she left this world, Gu Xingyin seemed to hear dolls crying and White Tiger's mournful whimper. Sorry, my partners. She closed her eyes and her consciousness fell into a deep sleep. Even without me, you can still live well in this world for a very, very long time. When she opened her eyes again, she was already in space. Proceed to the next quest. Gu Xingyin did not even bother to rest as she directly said. Yes, host, the system replied. When Gu Xingyin opened her eyes, she found that she was sitting inside a big bus. There were 5 other people in the same bus as her, 3 men and 2 women. Gu Xingyin did not say anything as she directly received the storyline of this world. After receiving the storyline, Gu Xingyin could only say that the guts of these 6 people were really big. The 6 people on the 2 buses, including Gu Xingyin, did not know each other until a day ago. They were 6 adventurers from different places. This time, they had gathered together to explore a ghost castle deep in the mountains. Gu Xingyin ridiculed. This was completely the plot of a horror novel. If she did not read the storyline, she would have guessed that the 6 of them would encounter a series of bizarre and supernatural events in that ancient castle. If the story was more bloody, only 1 or 2 of the 6 people would survive. After reading the storyline, it was confirmed that Gu Xingyin's ridicule was completely correct. The storyline of this world really was such a terrifying plot. Gu Xingyin's body was called Lingshi. After her parents died, they left her with an endless amount of property. Her hobbies were martial arts, adventure, and travel. Lingshi, who was 25 years old, had once won the provincial Sonda competition. She could be considered the most powerful person in this group of people. As for the other 5 people, one of them was a couple. They were ordinary white-collar workers and adventurers. This time, they took advantage of the New Year holiday to look for excitement. The remaining girl, Qin Xingqing, was the target of this world's mission. She was a university student. The other 2 men were a horror novel author and a reporter. According to him, he wanted to write a column about the exploration of the ghost castle when he went back this time. Unfortunately, he was unable to return. Gu Xingyin looked at the 5 people and sighed in her heart. He really didn't know what these people were thinking. They knew that a lot of accidents had happened in Ghost Castle, but they still wanted to come out and get themselves killed. In the original plot, other than the supporting female lead, Qin Xingqing, the other 5 would remain in the movie forever. Qin Xingqing's outcome was not much better. She had gone crazy. Because she was scared out of her wits, she couldn't sense the outside world. Those ghosts couldn't affect her, so she was spared. Speaking of courting death, this Qin Xingqing was the one who courted death the most out of all of them. Originally, when the 6 of them first entered the castle, they had a chance to leave. There were already people who wanted to retreat, but all of them changed their minds after Qin Xingqing's provocation, ridicule, and encouragement. If she didn't know the storyline, Gu Xingyin would really think that this Qin Xingqing was a spy sent by Ghost Castle. Chapter 1729. Why did Qin Xingqing say that? Because at the beginning of the plot, when everyone had just entered the ancient castle, that ancient castle had an owner. The owner of the ancient castle did not welcome these outsiders at all. This group of adventurers had received a warning from the beginning. At that time, the white-collar couple was scared and wanted to retreat. However, Qin Xingqing dissuaded them, saying that adventures were more interesting when they were scary. The white-collar couple felt that it would be embarrassing if they could not even compare to a little girl. Thus, they gritted their teeth and continued. From the moment they entered the ancient castle, the 6 of them began to experience all kinds of bizarre events. For example, the ancient castle that had not been entered for many years was indeed clean and spotless. For example, there were 6 sets of tableware neatly arranged in the dining room. When the covered bowls were opened, there were bloody hands inside. At that time, even horror novel enthusiasts wanted to give up. However, Qin Qingqing still stopped him. She was also very scared, but she felt more excited. She even comforted everyone, saying that someone must have known in advance that they were going to explore and played a prank on them. Those hands were definitely fake props. No one dared to verify the authenticity of those hands. Under such circumstances, Qin Qingqing, who appeared to be very calm, actually managed to fool a large group of people just like that. In the afternoon, when the sky was about to turn dark, everyone heard the sound of many people moving around on the roof. Lengshi finally made the decision to leave. When they went upstairs earlier, they were very sure that there was no one inside. The only way to go upstairs was to go to the hall where everyone was waiting. However, just as she was about to leave, the castle's old gate slowly closed in front of everyone. The whole world was pitch black. An evil voice rang in their ears, "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the ancient castle's carnival." After that, it was a bloody journey. Gu Xingyin calmly finished watching and said to the system calmly, "If I ask the driver to stop now, can I?" The system replied with a white flash, "Host, unless you voluntarily request to leave this world and give up the mission, no matter what excuse you use, the 6 of you will enter the ghost castle according to the plot development." Gu Xingyin, as a qualified mission enforcer, voluntarily giving up the mission was definitely not her style. "Isn't it just a ghost castle?" Gu Xingyin took a deep breath and said, "Okay, I'll continue." The system spoke again. "Due to the uniqueness of the plot this time, the host's mission has changed slightly." Gu Xingyin's eyes lit up. The system said, "The ghost castle opens the gate of life once every 10 days. The host's mission is to survive these 10 days. Gu Xingyin swallowed with difficulty. "After all, I'm a human, and the other party is a ghost. Besides, I don't have to care about the others, right?" The system replied, "As for the others, if the host can save one more person's life, after the mission is over, the host will enjoy more gifts from the world." Gu Xingyin instantly understood. What he meant was that he didn't want to force her, but he hoped that she could save the lives of her companions. As if sensing Gu Xingyin's anxiety, the system said, "Due to the special nature of this mission, in addition to the ability to draw a skill, the system will also give the host 3 one-time gift packs to help the host complete the mission." Chapter 1730. Gu Xingyin's eyes lit up when she heard this. The system never said useless things. That meant that if it said it would give something, it would definitely be something that would be extremely beneficial to the mission. She said, "Draw skill." System, ding, congratulations to the host, you have obtained the Psychic Beast, Psychic Eye, skill. Gu Xingyin, she had a feeling that although this skill sounded very useful, it made her feel even more scared. She couldn't help but ask, "What is the use of this Psychic Eye skill?" The system replied, "For this world, this skill is very useful. That means that the host can see the 3 realms and understand the yin and yang. Any ghost's disguise or illusion will not be able to cause any threat to the host." In other words, Gu Xingyin could see all the living things in the ghost castle. This knowledge made Gu Xingyin shiver uncontrollably. Just as the system said, this was a very useful skill. After all, most of the time, ghosts were best at creating illusions that were several times scarier than themselves to confuse others. But at the same time, this also meant that Gu Xingyin would have to face all the ghosts directly. Gu Xingyin finally understood why she was so scared. She never thought that there was anything in this world that she was afraid of, until she received this mission. In fact, Gu Xingyin himself didn't know why he was like this when he heard about the ghost castle. He was able to cut down zombies without batting an eyelid. She was just afraid. Gu Xingyin, who treated the system as a good partner, didn't hesitate to tell her partner, "System, I think I'm afraid of ghosts." System, it comforted Gu Xingyin, "Don't be afraid, host. I will give you 3 big gift packages." Gu Xingyin's heart was filled with hope. Then, ding host, please check. Guanyin soul-suppressing palace has 5 cards. Effect, each card lasts for 24 hours. No ghosts can get close. Ding host, please check. Received the ability to remain calm in front of ghosts and monsters. Ding host, please check. Received a dagger that can harm ghosts. Gu Xingyin silently looked at the 3 skills. She could understand the first and the third one. One was used to save her life, and the other was used to counterattack. Both were good things. But what the hell was the second one? The system explained, the second skill means that no matter how terrifying the supernatural phenomenon is in front of the host will be able to remain calm. No matter how scared the host is, the host's aura will not lose. Gu Xingyin, wasn't he just trying to save face? She sighed, opened her eyes, and began to look at the people in the car. He put his hand into his pocket and felt a few pieces of paper and a hard object that was a little hard to grip. This was the big gift from the system. Gu Xingyin looked over and saw a couple leaning against each other sitting diagonally to her left. They seemed to be the white-collar couple. Opposite him was a young girl with headphones plugged into her ears. She was holding a pink Hello Kitty case in her hand and seemed to be playing games. As if sensing Gu Xingyin's gaze, the girl raised her head and smiled at her. This was Qin Qingqing. On Gu Xingyin's right, a fashionably dressed man in black was fiddling with his camera. When he saw Gu Xingyin, he raised his hand and took a picture of her. He even smiled at Gu Xingyin with a very friendly expression. Chapter 1731. This reporter was called Zhang Chao. He was the most popular person in the group. Reporters generally had high EQ, but Zhang Chao was a straightforward person and had a good relationship with everyone. Of course, he liked to chat with Gu Xingyin the most. The best thing was to take a few photos of her. According to Zhang Chao, Ling Shi was born to be a model. She had good looks and a good figure. A few photos he took were the kind that could be on the cover of a magazine. On the left of Gu Xingyin, there was a man with glasses sitting in the corner, keeping a certain distance from everyone. He was the horror novel author, Qin Gu. Qin Gu was his pen name. As for his real name, Qin Gu didn't reveal it. Everyone had met by chance, so naturally, he wouldn't deliberately ask. Gu Xingyin thought for a while and said, "Did you bring enough food in your backpack? I'm afraid that if there's an accident, it'll be hard to say if there's not enough food." She herself only brought enough food for a week. The reporter was the first to speak with a smile. "I travel a lot, so I'm very experienced in this kind of thing. Don't worry, I brought a lot of compressed food. It's definitely enough." The horror novel author, Qin Gu, also said slowly, "My food can probably last for a few days." Qin Qingqing opened her backpack for everyone to see. Gu Xingyin was speechless when she saw a lot of book reviews, chocolates, spicy sticks, and the like. This girl, did she really think that she was here for a vacation? The white-collar couple also looked. The man said, "The two of us brought about 3 days' worth of food." Gu Xingyin frowned. In other words, this time, the 6 people, except for the reporter, didn't bring enough food. In a place like Ghost Castle, not to mention whether there was food inside, even if there was, she didn't dare to touch it. Looking outside, Gu Xingyin noticed that this was already the suburbs. There were almost no convenience stores or people. She walked to the front and asked the driver, "Brother, I want to ask, how long until we reach Ghost Castle? Will there be any shops on this road?" The driver was a middle-aged man in his 30s. They had spent a lot of money to hire him, but even so, the driver only dared to take them a few kilometers away from the Ghost Castle. According to the driver, that place was very creepy and he didn't dare to go near it. When they heard this, they were naturally even more excited. The driver opened his mouth and said, "About 2 more hours? There won't be any shops here. Let me think, there's a small village about 10 minutes ahead. I wonder if there'll be. I say, sister, there are so many fun places in the city. Why don't you go there? Why do you have to come to a place like this? Listen to Big Brother's advice and go back." He had already said this several times, but none of them took it seriously. Gu Xingyin thought, I want to go back too, but the plot won't let me. She made a prompt decision and said, then I'll have to trouble you to send us to that village first. I'll give you more money then. The driver waved his hand. That's not a problem. I'll drive you there. Gu Xingyin thanked him and returned to the car. She looked at the others and said, we'll pass by a village later. Put down some unimportant things and pack more food. Qin Xingxing was unhappy after she said this. What, it's just an adventure game. You're making it sound like an escape game. Other than food, there's only a game console in my bag. My snacks are enough to eat for a few days. Chapter 1732. Gu Xingyin looked at Qin Xingxing. Gu Xingyin, who had read the plot, knew that Qin Xingxing was the only daughter of a relatively wealthy family. Perhaps it was in such a family that she developed such a personality. She was not afraid of anything and felt that everything would develop as she expected. Actually, it could be called ego. Those who thought differently from her were all wrong. The novelist and the reporter did not speak. The girl and the white-collar couple also said, is there a need to be so serious? We've all brought food for a few days. It should be enough, right? She also disagreed. This woman, who had been in the workplace for several years, was obviously much nicer than Qin Xingxing. Leng Shi's persona was not a warm-hearted big sister, but a straightforward young lady. She said, I'm just reminding everyone that no one knows what the situation in the ghost castle is like. In the face of an unknown situation, being fully prepared is our biggest guarantee. Anyway, I've already reminded you. It's up to you whether you want to listen or not. Her almond-shaped eyes swept across everyone in the car. I've already asked the driver to take us to the village. Whether you need supplies or not, you can decide for yourselves. But there's one thing that I want to say first. If, and I'm saying if, there's really an emergency and there's not enough food, please don't blame others for being selfish and not helping her. After saying this, she closed her eyes to rest, not paying attention to the different expressions on everyone's faces. Everyone was a little confused by her words. After all, they were all strangers who had just met. There was a layer between them when they spoke and did things. No matter how they were usually, they were all amiable on the surface. This was the first time they had seen Leng Shi speak in such a serious tone. Qin Xingxing's expression was a little ugly. She had a feeling that Gu Xingyin was targeting her. The reporter's expression was a little serious. He was good at reading people's expressions and had a good eye for people. From the beginning, he knew that the most reliable person in this group was probably Leng Shi, the hot and sexy beauty. He thought that he could still see through Leng Shi, but from the beginning, Zhang Chao felt that he could not see through this woman in front of him. His reporter's intuition had helped him through many crises. So this time, he made a decision, to follow Leng Shi. The horror novelist, Qin Gu, looked at Gu Xingyin a few times before lowering his head. Although Gu Xingyin's words were not pleasant to hear, she was right. There was nothing wrong with making ample preparations. The couple seemed to be discussing something in a low voice. Soon, they arrived at the village. The small village looked very clean and tidy. No one was surprised to see strange cars coming in. Gu Xingyin was the first to get out of the car with her huge backpack. She looked at an auntie who was basking in the sun with her eyes squinted and asked, "Auntie, I would like to ask if you have a shop here?" The auntie lazily raised her head and said, "Go to the right, the third house." She was actually speaking Mandarin with perfect pronunciation. Gu Xingyin was delighted. "Thank you, auntie." She walked towards the direction the auntie was pointing at. Behind her, Zhang Chao also got out of the car. The couple seemed to hesitate for a moment, and the man also came down with his bag. Only Qin Xingxing and the woman were left. Girls probably followed the crowd. The other girl also said to Qin Xingxing, "Xingxing, why don't you go and buy something too?" Chapter 1733. When Qin Xingxing saw that everyone had left, she was actually a little shaken. Hearing this woman's words, she hesitated for a moment before getting out of the car. The convenience store in this small village wasn't big, but it was enough for these people. Gu Xingyin looked at the things on the shelves and chose some easier to carry into her bag: energy drinks, purified water, chocolate, sugar, bread. They were all things that could maintain her body's energy and fill her stomach. She originally had some compressed food in her bag, which Gu Xingyin had kept. She glanced around and saw that there were a few books, an imported stereo, and a bunch of useless but expensive things in the bag. Gu Xingyin took them all out and threw them away. Seeing her like this, the few people who didn't think much of it all started to take it seriously. The moment Qin Qingqing entered, she saw Gu Xingyin throw her stereo on the ground. She exclaimed, "This is a W.S. stereo. It costs tens of thousands of yuan. You just threw it away like this? If you don't want it, you can give it to me." Gu Xingyin simply said, "If I were you, I'd think about how to fill my backpack with as many useful things as possible at this time. This stereo isn't of much use in that kind of place." She looked at the few of them and suddenly said, "If you're willing to believe me, prepare food for more than 10 days, everyone." After she said this, there was a sudden clap of thunder in the sky. At this time, it was a sunny day outside with no clouds in the clear sky. The sudden clap of thunder gave everyone a shock. They felt that this clap of thunder was really strange. It came so suddenly, as if it was warning someone. Everyone thought of Gu Xingyin's words just now and suddenly felt a chill in their hearts. Gu Xingyin's lips curled up into a smile. She knew that this was the law of the world detecting that someone suddenly made a sound and disrupted the rules, but it couldn't find the person behind the scenes, so it could only use this clap of thunder as a warning. The law of the world was no longer the one that could casually expel her from the world. No, it should be said that Gu Xingyin was no longer the Gu Xingyin who would be easily detected and rejected by the laws of the world. She tried to make another effort and said after some deliberation, "You might not believe me, but I used to learn some things from an old Taoist, such as divination. Our adventure this time is not very optimistic. If there's anyone willing to back out, it's still not too late." Before she could finish her sentence, a series of thunderous booms came from outside. Gu Xingyin smiled helplessly. Everyone covered their ears and waited for the thunder to pass. Gu Xingyin shrugged. "Do you see that? This is the so-called secret of heaven that cannot be revealed." As she spoke, she took another bag of bread and put it in her bag. At this time, the way they looked at Gu Xingyin was very different from before. But at this time, they didn't realize what the so-called not optimistic meant. Qin Qingqing even looked at Gu Xingyin excitedly and said, "Ling Shi, you're really too amazing. This is really too amazing. Right now, I'm extremely curious about our upcoming journey." Gu Xingyin glanced around and found that not only Qin Qingqing, but everyone's faces were filled with excitement and eagerness to try. She sighed in her heart. Indeed, even if she wanted to change something, she still had to experience what she had to experience. Chapter 1734. However, it wasn't completely without benefits. At least for now, no one had any objections to Gu Xingyin's suggestion. Even Qin Qingqing stuffed her bag full of food. When they went out, Gu Xingyin asked again, "Do you have flashlights and weapons for self-defense?" Although she asked this, she was mainly looking at Qin Qingqing and the white-collar worker. Both of their expressions froze. Gu Xingyin knew that these two people obviously didn't bring anything. Gu Xingyin sighed. "I'll say it again. We're really not playing a game. Are you really not going to consider going back like this?" In the end, the two of them bought 2 portable flashlights and found 2 iron rods from a farmer's house as self-defense. Before the car started again, Gu Xingyin asked again if anyone was willing to leave. It was very dangerous ahead. Everyone rejected this suggestion. Gu Xingyin completely gave up. As expected, the world's plot wouldn't let the plot go off track. She could only say, "Everyone, have a good rest." When the time came, there wouldn't be such a peaceful time. The car quietly drove towards a more and more desolate place. Gu Xingyin fell into a deep sleep and let the system call her at any time if there was a situation. She understood that when they reached a place like the Ghost Castle, let alone sleep, in such a tense situation, She might not even dare to close her eyes. Everyone was woken up by the driver. The driver stopped the car and said, "From here, keep walking. It'll take about an hour to see the place you want to go." The others didn't say anything. Qin Xingxing began to complain. "An hour? Won't we die of exhaustion? Uncle driver, why don't you just send us a little longer?" The driver stopped smiling. "I told you in advance that I won't send you to the ghost castle. That's an ominous place." Qin Xingxing opened her mouth to say something, but Gu Xingyin stepped forward and took over the topic. "All right, the young lady is young and impetuous. Big brother, sorry to trouble you." When the driver saw Gu Xingyin, his expression softened a little. He sighed. "Sister, I know you won't listen to anything I say. I wish you good luck." Gu Xingyin suddenly stopped the driver. "Big brother, can I trouble you with something?" The driver asked curiously, "What is it?" Gu Xingyin said, "Starting from tomorrow, 10 days later, can you come to this place to pick us up?" The driver hesitated for a moment. To be honest, he really didn't want to come to such an evil place. Gu Xingyin put on a pleading look and said, "If you come, I'll double the price." The driver was a little tempted. He said, "When I come, when will you come out?" Gu Xingyin hesitated for a moment before saying, 10 days later. "The earlier you come, the better." She thought for a moment and added, "If you wait until 5 in the afternoon and still don't see us, then quickly drive away. Don't stay in this place at night." Listening to her say such ominous words, the driver couldn't help but shudder. Other people's faces also changed. The driver quickly said, "Okay, I'll wait for you here 10 days later." Gu Xingyin nodded. Looking at the white minibus leaving, Gu Xingyin turned her head and looked at the unknown distance. "Let's go," she said slowly. Behind her, several other people followed her and embarked on the journey. Chapter 1735. The group of people began to walk on the vast countryside. Gu Xingyin actually didn't understand why there was an ancient castle that looked like it existed in the Middle Ages in a place like this. However, this was the setting of the world's plot. The others didn't find anything strange about it at all. Gu Xingyin could only suppress her doubts. The sun in the west was getting closer and closer to the horizon. Gu Xingyin looked at the time. It was 5:30 in the afternoon. They had already walked for half an hour. They estimated that they would reach the ghost castle in another half an hour. 6 in the afternoon was when the sky turned dark. Gu Xingyin sighed. Even the time was set so strangely. It would be a waste of the plot if nothing happened. Qin Xingxing began to complain. "It's so heavy. I'm so tired. Why do I have to carry so much?" Gu Xingyin glanced at her. Qin Xingxing's pink backpack was full. It was full of food that Gu Xingyin saw she stuffed in herself. She was also holding a metal stick in one hand and sighing as she walked. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but say, "If you really can't go on, you can rest here and wait for us." She meant what she said. To be honest, it was better to let Qin Xingxing stay here in the beginning than to let her go to the ghost castle to cause trouble. Although Gu Xingyin knew that most of the things in the original plot were set up by the plot, she still couldn't have any good feelings for a girl like Qin Xingxing. Qin Xingxing's eyes widened. "How is that possible? I've already walked all the way here. Think about it. I spent so much effort and walked so far. I wasted my rare vacation to come all the way to this godforsaken place. How can I give up?" She glared at Gu Xingyin angrily. She felt that this woman was always targeting her. Gu Xingyin sneered. "Since you know that you won't give up, why are you still complaining here? Other than wearing down your willpower and making yourself more tired, complaining won't get you anything." Qin Xingxing rolled her eyes. "I just like it. What can you do about it?" When Zhang Chao, who was in the team, saw this, he hurriedly tried to persuade her. The white-collared woman also spoke nicely. Ever since Gu Xingyin had revealed her skills, she had begun to show signs of becoming the leader of the group. This group of people was going to take a risk. Naturally, they were not willing to offend someone with real ability. As for Qin Qingqing, she was the youngest here, so they were all willing to give in to her. In the end, Gu Xingyin and Qin Qingqing did not quarrel. Of course, even if those people did not stop her, Gu Xingyin would not have a conflict with Qin Qingqing. After all, she was not willing to waste too much energy on Qin Qingqing. The group continued walking. Soon, they saw the destination of their trip. In the distance, against the background of the gray sky, an ancient castle with black and gray colors appeared in front of everyone. Although it was quite far away, the antiquity and sense of age still assaulted his senses. The novelist took a look and said longingly, "This is the perfect material." The reporters could not help but pick up their cameras and take a few good photos. Qin Qingqing suddenly muttered, "Look at the sky above the ancient castle. Doesn't it look like it's black?" When everyone heard this, they took a look. It really did look like it. Above the steeple of the ancient castle, the sky really did seem to be different from the other places. It gave off an ominous feeling. Chapter 1736. The white-collared woman's face showed a trace of fear. But the novelist Qin Gus said with a smile, "This is because of your psychological reasons, right? Or perhaps, this is just a visual illusion. If you don't believe me, look carefully. Where is the darkness?" The few of them followed his words and looked again. Indeed, the sky above was no different from other places. Everyone laughed and joked that they were just being paranoid. Only Gu Xingyin did not laugh. Because what she saw was completely different from what the others saw. Qin Qingqing said that the sky above the ancient castle had a trace of black and gray, but in Gu Xingyin's eyes, it was not like that at all. In Gu Xingyin's eyes, the ancient castle in front of her, the entire structure, was completely shrouded in wisps of black fog. With one look, she knew that it was not a place that normal people would go. Gu Xingyin's expression became even calmer. "System, if I turn around and walk back now, is it too late?" "System. Host, you can try." Gu Xingyin turned around and walked away without another word. But after 2 steps, she turned around and walked back with an expressionless face. The others looked at her strangely. Zhang Chao asked, "Ling Shi, what's wrong?" Gu Xingyin said calmly, "Nothing, I just remembered that I seemed to have forgotten something." This excuse was not at all sincere. Qin Qingqing sneered and said, "Our great beauty Leng, don't tell me you're scared." Gu Xingyin did not want to bother with her at all. She wanted to say, "Do you believe that if you saw the same thing as me, you would not only be scared, you would probably cry?" She gritted her teeth at the so-called world's plot. Just now, when she turned around and walked back, she clearly felt a strong resistance. With every step she took, the resistance on her body increased. She had no choice but to retreat. The system was right. Unless she gave up on the mission, she had no other choice. Gu Xingyin sighed slightly. Looking at the dark castle in front of her, she said calmly, "Let's hurry up and walk forward. It's going to be dark soon." A gust of cold wind blew, accompanied by Gu Xingyin's indifferent and emotionless tone, making everyone shudder. The 6 of them subconsciously moved closer together. The white-collared woman could not help but grab her boyfriend's sleeve. They continued walking forward. After 5 or 6 minutes, they walked to the entrance of the ancient castle. At this moment, the last rays of light from the sky disappeared below the horizon. Night began to cover the sky. The entire land was about to fall into darkness. Gu Xingyilin's footsteps. She really wanted to stop. Because in the instant when the sky darkened, no one else could see. Only she could clearly see the pairs of blood-red eyes on the pitch-black ancient castle in the dark night. Those cold blood-red eyes looked at the outsiders emotionlessly. Those sticky and bloodthirsty eyes made Gu Xingyin's expression even colder. Damn it, her expression did not change. She was as calm as Mount Tai. Gu Xingyin could not help but curse in her heart. They had already reached the entrance. At this moment, everyone seemed to sense a trace of fear similar to Mo Qian's. The white-collared woman was a girl after all. Her voice trembled. I'm a little scared." Why don't we not go in? Let's stay here and go back tomorrow. Chapter 1737. The white-collared woman's words struck a chord in Gu Xingyin's heart. She wanted to nod immediately and agree that they shouldn't go in. They would camp outside for a night and go back tomorrow. But she couldn't say that. Then, she listened coldly as Qin Qingqing mocked the white-collared woman. "TSK, don't forget why we're here. We're already at our destination, and you still want to back out?" As she spoke, she reached out and pushed forward. Creak, creak. The ear-piercing sound of the iron door slowly opening entered everyone's ears. Gu Xingyin's expression became even calmer, to the point of indifference. Qin Qingqing was still muttering, "I'm actually so strong." Gu Xingyin closed her eyes. "It's not that you're strong. It's that the thing inside is inviting us in." Since things had come to this, there was no use in running away. She silently took out the dagger that she had been keeping in her pocket. Holding it in her hand, she said faintly, "Everyone, take your self-defense items. No one has been here for many years. Who knows if there might be something unfriendly here? 2 of you, turn on your flashlights. The rest of you, keep yours for later use." As she spoke, she turned on her flashlight with one hand. Seeing this, Zhang Chao also turned on his flashlight. Gu Xingyin saw him take out a foldable Swiss Army knife from his backpack. Gu Xingyin praised, "This knife is not bad. You actually passed the security check." Zhang Chao smiled proudly. "Awesome, right?" Thus, the 6 of them used the flashlight's light to walk into the castle. After entering through the main door, they should be in the reception hall. Everyone slowly looked over with their flashlights and could see some things stained with dust and cobwebs. There was a huge rectangular dining table carved out of white jade marble. Judging from its length, it should be able to accommodate at least 20 people. There were lifelike statues in the living room, murals on the ceiling, and so on. These things might have been very beautiful and noble a few hundred years ago. But after such a long time, in the eyes of these adventurers, they had become things that made their hair stand on end. Gu Xingyin recalled the plot. It was their first night in the castle. There wouldn't be any real danger that night, but there would be all kinds of mischief. She knew that those pranks were just some residents of the castle who didn't welcome them. Tonight was the only chance for the 6 of them to leave the castle. However, the 6 of them didn't manage to catch him. "Ah!" The white-collar woman suddenly screamed. Everyone's hearts were in their mouths. Gu Xingyin calmly shouted at her, "Calm down." "What happened?" The white-collar woman buried her head in her boyfriend's arms and pointed at a place with a trembling finger. "There's someone there." Everyone's hearts clenched. The air seemed to freeze all of a sudden. This was an ancient castle that had been abandoned for countless years. Other than them, who else could there be? After a few seconds of dead silence, Gu Xingyin moved her hand and shone the flashlight precisely at the place the white-collar lady had mentioned. Zhang Chao held back his scream and let out a sigh of relief. He forced a smile and said, "It's fine. It's just a statue." Only then did everyone carefully examine it. Sure enough, it was just a lifelike statue of an elegant and beautiful woman wearing a cream-colored waist-length dress. Her eyes were lowered as she stood there. Chapter 1738. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Qin Qingqing patted her chest and heaved a sigh of relief. Thank goodness, thank goodness. You scared me to death." She looked at the white-collar lady who was still in shock and couldn't help but complain, "I say, Sister Shuewan, you're already nervous in a place like this. Can you not scare people? Look carefully before you scream." "I was scared to death by you." Gu Xingyin didn't care about Qin Qingqing's complaints. The moment the flashlight shone on it, her pupils constricted. That place, how was that a statue? It was clearly a woman wearing a white dress with a pale face. Oh no, it was a female ghost staring at them expressionlessly. Gu Xingyin. She said to the system in a trembling voice, "I'm really scared." Speaking of which, she had been a ghost king before. But the feeling back then was completely different from now. Not to mention that when she was Lan Ling, all she saw were basically ghost cultivators. What were ghost cultivators? A ghost that could cultivate actually looked no different from a cultivator of the immortal or devil path. Even if some ghosts revealed their true appearance under special circumstances, she wasn't afraid because she could turn them into ashes with a wave of her hand. Moreover, those ghosts were all her fanatical admirers. But now? If the system hadn't given her the ability to remain calm and collected, Gu Xingyin believed that she would have started screaming at this moment. But under the powerful halo of the skill, even if she was facing a real female ghost, she could still remain calm and act cool. Gu Xingyin forced herself to look away from the female ghost indifferently. She saw that Zhang Chao seemed to be curious and wanted to go forward to study the statue, so she quickly said, "Don't go." Zhang Chao turned to look at her in confusion. Then, Gu Xingyin realized that the female ghost also turned her head slowly and fixed her gaze on her. Gu Xingyin. System. Her voice was trembling at this moment. The system calmly comforted her. "Host, don't be afraid. You know that this ghost won't hurt you tonight. At most, it will scare you. Just pretend that you didn't see it." Gu Xingyin, how could this be the same? The system hesitated. Then, why don't I take back your ability as a spiritual beast? Gu Xingyin thought about it for a moment, then decisively refused. The system, Gu Xingyin said, "Forget it. I can see them. Although I'm scared, I can at least know their movements. If I can't see it, I'll probably be even more nervous and scared." The system nodded. What the host said made sense. Gu Xingyin could only ignore the female ghost's gaze. She braced herself and said to Zhang Chao expressionlessly, "We don't know anything about this place. It's better not to touch anything." She took 2 steps forward and grabbed one of Zhang Chao's hands. When she turned around, she gave him a look. Zhang Chao didn't understand what she meant, but he knew that Gu Xingyin had some special skills. He quickly nodded, indicating that there was no problem. When Qin Xingxing saw this scene, she was a little unhappy. There were 3 men in this group. One of them had a girlfriend. Qin Gu was an otaku. He wore glasses and always had a gloomy expression. Only Zhang Chao looked bright and handsome. He also dressed very fashionably. It was easy for girls to fall for him. Qin Xingxing had some unclear thoughts about Zhang Chao. However, Zhang Chao was obviously more interested in the mature and cold Ling Shi. At this moment, when she saw the 2 of them, Qin Xingxing's heart was filled with anger. Before Gu Xingyin could stop her, she walked in front of the statue and touched it. It's not a big deal. Chapter 1739. Gu Xingyin watched helplessly as Qin Xingxing approached the female ghost and patted her on the back. Then, the female ghost seemed to be attracted by her. She finally looked away from Gu Xingyin and fixed her eyes on Qin Xingxing. Qin Xingxing didn't notice it at all. She even took out her mobile phone, turned on the backlight, and took a picture of herself and the female ghost together. Gu Xingyin saw that the female ghost gently put her pale hand with green nails on Qin Xingxing's shoulder. She shuddered in her heart. Then she said calmly, "Qin Xingxing, don't be stubborn. Come here." Qin Xingxing was dumbfounded. She just looked at her mobile phone with a pale face. Gu Xingyin couldn't help raising her voice, "Qin Xingxing." Her voice seemed to wake Qin Xingxing up. She screamed, turned around, and threw her mobile phone on the ground. Then she ran to Gu Xingyin without caring about anything else. Gu Xingyin watched as the female ghost glanced in his direction before her figure gradually disappeared into the darkness. Only a real statue was left in that place. Qin Xingxing's reaction shocked everyone. She ran to the middle of the crowd almost in an instant and pulled the sleeve of Qin Gu, who was closest to her. With the help of the flashlight, everyone could see Qin Xingxing's deathly pale face. She opened her mouth and kept gasping for breath. It seemed that she couldn't even speak. Gu Xingyin suddenly reached out and patted her on the back. He called out her name sternly, "Qin Xingxing." This sound was like a clap of thunder in Qin Xingxing's ears, making her come back to her senses in an instant. Qin Qingqing blankly opened her eyes and looked at her companions around her. Suddenly, she burst into tears. In the silent darkness, Qin Qingqing's behavior made several people's hearts palpitate. The white-collar worker named Shui Wan asked cautiously, "Qingqing, what's wrong with you? What did you see just now?" Just now, all of them saw that Qin Qingqing suddenly showed that kind of expression after seeing the photo on the phone. Hearing her mention this, Qin Qingqing choked on her words. She said with a trembling voice, that statue is not a person." Zhang Chao laughed and comforted her, "Of course that statue isn't a person. It's..." After he finished speaking, his voice stopped. Qin Qingqing wouldn't say something like that for no reason. Sure enough, in the next moment, Qin Qingqing said with a horrified expression, "That's not a human. That's a female ghost. After I took the photo, when I looked at it, it wasn't a statue that was standing beside me. It was a female ghost with a pale face." As soon as she finished speaking, everyone fell into silence. After a long time, another white-collar woman said with a trembling voice, "Qing Qing, don't joke around. We're in a place like this, don't scare us." Qin Qingqing shook her head desperately. It's true. If you don't believe me, you can check my phone yourself." She pointed at the phone that was still lying on the ground with a faint light on the screen. The few of them looked at each other, but no one dared to pick up the phone that was thrown on the ground. Chapter 1740. In the end, it was still Gu Xingyin who walked over. She hoped that what Qin Qingqing said was true. If that was the case, she would have a reason to convince these people to leave the castle tonight. Gu Xingyin was not particularly afraid of picking up the phone. After all, she had seen a real ghost. Why would she be afraid of a mere photo? She walked forward and picked up the phone on the ground. She glanced at it while she was at it. With just one glance, her heart sank. Everyone looked at Gu Xingyin nervously. When they saw that her expression did not change after picking up the phone, they all relaxed. According to normal reactions, if Leng Shi really saw a ghost, she would not be so calm. Qin Qingqing also stared at Gu Xingyin with wide eyes. She did not believe that she had seen wrongly. Gu Xingyin calmly walked in front of everyone and then pointed the phone screen at them. Everyone saw very clearly that in the picture, it was a photo of Qin Qingqing and a statue in a white dress. However, even though the lights were on at night, the surrounding situation still looked a little eerie. However, everyone could clearly see that it was just an ordinary statue. It was a false alarm. Shui Wan smiled and said, "Qingqing, you were too nervous, so you were hallucinating, right? I really thought that you were very brave. Now, it looks like you're about the same as me." Qin Qingqing was a little confused. To be honest, she did not think that what she had seen was an illusion at all. It was such a real glance. Even now, she could still remember the female ghost's appearance. She was wearing the exact same dress as the one on the statue. Yes. Her face was also very similar to the statue's. Her pale green fingers were on her arm in the photo, staring at her faintly. How could that be an illusion? Qin Qingqing threw the phone out again. This time, the phone did not hold up. The light on the screen went out instantly. She did not know if it was completely broken or what. Qin Qingqing shook her head and said in a panic, No, what I saw was definitely not an illusion. That statue is a ghost." Unfortunately, her appearance was like that of a little girl who had suffered a great shock. The words she spoke were not very convincing. However, Gu Xingyin still wanted to take this opportunity to encourage them. "I also think that this place is a bit strange. Why don't we stop here and go out?" It was impossible for her to leave by herself, but she hoped that someone could leave. If she could complete her mission, the outcome would be much better. The moment she said this, Qin Qingqing immediately nodded. In the beginning, this little girl had always mocked others for being timid, but now, she was more eager to leave than anyone else. Zhang Chao hesitated for a moment before saying, "Actually, we didn't encounter any supernatural phenomenon, right? Don't scare yourself. I'm here to take risks." I don't want to give up because of such a small matter. Chingu also nodded. I also feel that there is no need to leave. The couple looked at each other. The girl, Shuewan, seemed to be a little scared, but the man was obviously braver and was still eager to try. Then, everyone turned to look at Gu Xingyin. Qin Xingxing also looked at Gu Xingyin with anticipation. She hoped that Gu Xingyin could support her and leave with her. Gu Xingyin herself was very willing to leave. However, facing everyone's trusting gazes, she was crying in her heart. She said coldly, I want to stay here. Chapter 1741. After Gu Xingyin's words, everyone basically made their choice. Except for Qin Xingxing, everyone expressed that it was not easy to come here, so how could they leave without any gains? Gu Xingyin looked at Qin Xingxing, hesitated for a moment, and said, Xingxing, why don't you go out alone and wait for us outside? Qin Xingxing looked at the gloomy environment around her, almost holding back her tears, and shook her head, no, I'll go with you. If she went with the others, at least there would be someone to take care of her. But if she went out alone, who knew what would happen? Qin Xingxing understood very well. Thus, the matter was settled. Looking at the surrounding environment, Gu Xingyin said, it's dark now, we're not in a hurry to explore. Let's find a place to rest for the night, and wait until dawn tomorrow to slowly explore. What do you think? Although she said this, she knew better than anyone else in her heart. When dawn came tomorrow, the peace here would no longer be there. The real Azura purgatory would officially begin. The rest of the people looked at the gloomy environment, and in addition, they had been in the car for half a day and walked for so long, so they all nodded. Gu Xingyin looked around, found a relatively spacious and clean place by the wall, and sat there. The few of them lit up their flashlights and took out some food from their bags. Gu Xingyin also warned them very seriously, in this place, you have to be vigilant at all times, especially your bags with food. You must be careful, and you can't make any mistakes. The few of them nodded. After eating, Gu Xingyin divided the 6 of them into groups of 2, and took turns to keep watch at night. We don't know what's in this castle, it's better to have someone keep watch at night. I'll keep watch first, you guys go and rest. Gu Xingyin took out the dagger at her waist and said. Zhang Chao also volunteered, I'll go with you. The white-collar man looked and said, then in 3 hours, you guys wake me and Wan up, we'll keep watch for the second round together. Qin Gu and Qin Xingxing were in the 3rd round. Everyone nodded. Gu Xingyin and Zhang Chao sat back to back while the others closed their eyes and fell asleep. Time passed slowly. Gu Xingyin could hear the long breathing of the person behind her. Apparently, they had fallen asleep after a long day of tiredness and tension. Her eyes were wide open and she was not sleepy at all. She was afraid that something would suddenly jump out from beside her. He really got what he wanted. Gu Xingyin glanced around and saw a young man of about 12 or 13 years of age suddenly appear from the opposite corner. The young man looked very delicate and cute, but his face was abnormally pale, reflecting a dim light in the darkness. He stood there with his back straight, his eyes flashing with a faint green light as he looked over. He was wearing very shabby clothes. The style was completely different from what he was wearing now. It looked like the formal attire of the nobles in ancient Western times. Gu Xingyin looked at the little brat calmly. Zhang Chao seemed to have sensed something. He shivered, rubbed his hands, and said to Gu Xingyin, Lingshi, do you feel that it's especially cold? Gu Xingyin said in her heart, a ghost is staring at you without blinking, of course you would feel cold. She could only comfort Zhang Chao, maybe the temperature difference at night is bigger. Zhang Chao nodded. After a while, he came over and said in a low voice, Lingshi, I still feel that this place is a bit strange. Gu Xingyin did not pay attention to him, because she saw that the little brat was floating towards her. Chapter 1742. Gu Xingyin watched as the little ghost got closer and closer to her. His legs were clearly leaning against the ground, but when he moved, she didn't see him move at all. His whole body was slowly moving towards the 2 of them. With this and the surrounding environment, Gu Xingyin was sure that no horror movie could produce such an effect. While she was nervous, Zhang Chao was still talking. As if to ease the tense atmosphere, Zhang Chao said half-jokingly, "Do you think we'll really meet a malicious spirit that has lived for hundreds or thousands of years in here?" Gu Xingyin, she wanted to say, "Yes, we've already met it." While Zhang Chao was talking, the little ghost had already arrived beside the two of them. At first, he stood in front of Gu Xingyin and then bent down. Gu Xingyin almost lost her breath. Because the little ghost bent down and stared straight at Gu Xingyin's face with his pale green eyes. Gu Xingyin didn't need to look down to see that the little ghost had already grown bronze-silver cufflinks. System. System. Gu Xingyin's voice was trembling in her consciousness. At this time, the only thing she could trust and confide in was the system that accompanied her. "I'm scared to death, it's too scary." Gu Xingyin's voice was even crying. The system calmly comforted her, "Don't be afraid, host. He won't hurt you. You just need to pretend that you can't see him." On the surface, Gu Xingyin didn't seem to be afraid at all. She sat quietly with a tense expression, as if she was thinking about something. Zhang Chao, who was sitting back to back with her, felt a little strange. Why did he feel that Lengsher's body was so stiff? He asked casually. Gu Xingyin quickly turned her head with this excuse and heaved a sigh of relief. She made up an excuse and said that she felt a little cold at night. Fortunately, the little brat also felt a little bored. He got up and left Gu Xingyin's side. Gu Xingyin felt that her back was drenched in cold sweat. Then, Zhang Chao was in trouble. He suddenly shuddered and complained to Gu Xingyin, "This place is really cold. I always feel like I'm sitting in the cold wind of winter." Gu Xingyin did not dare to look back at him. That was because she saw that the kid didn't leave. Instead, he went to Zhang Chao's side. He seemed to be very interested in the camera hanging on Zhang Chao's chest. He was playing with the camera with his pale hands with long black nails. The little ghost's posture made it seem as if his entire body had shrunk into Zhang Chao's embrace. Of course he would feel cold. Gu Xingyin finally couldn't help but look back at Zhang Chao, who didn't know anything. He was just frowning because of the cold. She sighed in her heart. Sure enough, the ignorant were fearless. If Zhang Chao could see it, he would probably collapse if he saw a little brat in his arms. "What's the matter?" Zhang Chao asked in confusion. Gu Xingyin replied casually, "Nothing." Zhang Chao asked, "Then why did you suddenly push me?" Gu Xingyin, she suddenly fell silent. Zhang Chao seemed to realize something and suddenly fell silent. After a long time, Gu Xingyin felt that the sleeve of her coat was gently pulled. Zhang Chao's trembling voice came, "Lengsher. Just now, you didn't push me, right?" Chapter 1743. Gu Xingyin turned around and looked at the little ghost who was standing beside them in boredom. She saw a faint handprint on Zhang Chao's shoulder. It was obvious that it wasn't her own. She tried her best to calm down and comfort Zhang Chao. "Don't scare yourself. It's not like that." Zhang Chao didn't think that the push just now was an illusion. But when he saw that even a woman like Leng Shi was so calm, he felt that his reaction was really embarrassing. He could only suppress that trace of fear and quietly wait for time to pass. The little ghost stayed here for a while and then left. But this wasn't the end of the matter. In the dark and fearful atmosphere, time always passed extra slowly. Zhang Chao raised his wrist to look at the time almost every few minutes. Then, he realized with despair that only a few minutes had passed since the last time he looked at the time. Gu Xingyin, who was looking at every corner of the hall, suddenly noticed that Zhang Chao's breathing became heavy. Something happened. Gu Xingyin turned around and hurriedly asked, "Zhang Chao, what's wrong?" This time, Zhang Chao's voice was really trembling. He pointed at the empty floor in front of him. Not only his throat, but his whole body was trembling. "Blood. The floor is full of blood, and it's rushing towards us." Gu Xingyin looked carefully. There was nothing on the floor. But when she looked up, she did see a woman wearing a pointed hat on the wall on the ceiling, smiling at them. But that smile, no matter how you looked at it, it was so strange that it made people's hair stand on end. Gu Xingyin. This group of ghosts really didn't give people peace at all. Zhang Chao couldn't help but take a few steps back, as if he was avoiding something. He just happened to trip Qin Gu, who was sleeping behind him. Qin Gu was groggily woken up and scolded impatiently. Then, he seemed to realize where he was. He hurriedly opened his eyes and picked up the self-defense weapon that he had been sleeping with. Then, he pulled Zhang Chao and asked, "What's wrong? What happened?" Zhang Chao was pulled awake by him. He pointed at the floor. "There's so much blood." Qin Gu was shocked. He looked in the direction that Zhang Chao was pointing at and shone his flashlight over there. It was completely blank. Where was the blood? Zhang Chao also glanced at it. The blood was really gone. Qin Gu probably knew that his companion was probably nervous, so he didn't scold him. He only said, "You must be too nervous, causing your body to hallucinate. There's nothing. Don't be afraid." As he spoke, he looked at the time and took the initiative to ask Zhang Chao to switch places so that Zhang Chao could rest for a while. Looking at Zhang Chao's current condition, it was not suitable for him to continue keeping watch. Zhang Chao didn't refuse. After Zhang Chao lay down, it became Gu Xingyin and Qin Gu sitting together. Qin Gu suddenly said, "I'm very curious. Leng Shi, I've been in the ghost castle for so long, but I've never seen you scared." Gu Xingyin thought, "That's because I'm afraid in my heart, and I can't show it on my face." But she couldn't say that out loud. Under such circumstances, she absolutely could not say anything that would weaken the morale of the team. Gu Xingyin said calmly, "Scared? At any time, fear is the most useless thing." Qin Gu looked at Gu Xingyin with a strange expression, as if he didn't expect a woman to say something like that. Chapter 1744. Nothing much happened in the following period of time. Gu Xingyin successfully changed shifts with the white-collar couple. She silently closed her eyes and lay on the floor. This was the last night of peace. In the future, no one would dare to sleep even if there was time for them to sleep. In fact, this peaceful was only relative. However, Gu Xingyin was sure that she would not be in any danger, so she reluctantly fell asleep. Perhaps it was because the rest of the people had better luck, but after that, there were no more strange occurrences. The next morning, Gu Xingyin was the first one to wake up from his sleep. She opened her eyes and sat up. Qin Xingxing and Zhang Chao were sitting back to back. Qin Xingxing had already fallen asleep with her head down, while Zhang Chao had a cigarette in his mouth. Obviously, he was not sleepy at all. This was the first time Gu Xingyin saw the whole picture of the castle. It was very big. He didn't feel it when he came here at night, but now, just the hall on the first floor was already a few hundred square meters. Inside, there were cobwebs, dust, and broken furniture, but he could still vaguely see the splendor of the past. Gu Xingyin looked to both sides. There were a few open windows high up on the wall. From afar, he could still see the gray sky outside through the windows. Gu Xingyin called Zhang Chao and woke the others up. It was the first time that everyone saw the castle in the daytime. Maybe it was because of the light, but the castle only revealed a heavy smell of decay. It was not as scary as in the dark. Qin Xingxing threw the fear of last night to the back of her mind. She said excitedly, "This castle is so big. It will probably take us a day or two to walk around." Zhang Chao picked up his camera and could not wait to take a few photos. He looked at the photos in the camera and was very satisfied with the results. The horror novelist Qin Gu was also very excited. Obviously, he had found some good material. Gu Xingyin looked at the aristocratic family on her watch and said, "Everyone, eat something first. After that, we will start." It was 5:40 in the morning. Everyone brought their own food, so they chatted and ate at the same time. When everyone was full, Gu Xingyin looked at the time again. 6:00 sharp. She took a deep breath and said, "All of you, stand beside me." Everyone was confused. However, Zhang Chao and Qin Gu both subconsciously stood beside Gu Xingyin. When the rest of the people saw this, they also followed suit and squeezed together. In the next moment, the world in their eyes changed. Those dirty, old, and rotten things seemed to have gone back in time in an instant. It was like an exquisite magic. Everyone watched the entire castle as if it had gone back hundreds of years and returned to her most beautiful and dazzling moment in an instant. The floor became spotless, and the murals on the ceiling became colorful again. On the dining table not far from everyone, there was a pure white tablecloth without a trace of dirt. On it, there were even a few newly bloomed roses in a crystal vase. All of this subverted everyone's imagination. What appeared in front of everyone was a luxurious castle comparable to a palace. No one had seen this kind of majesty, luxury, and splendor before. However, at this moment, no one expressed any amazement at this. Because this was too abnormal. Chapter 1745. Zhang Chao put down his camera. Such a scene that was beyond human control was beyond everyone's imagination. Qin Gu was the first to react. He suddenly shouted, "If something is wrong, it must be a demon. Everyone, get out of here." As he spoke, he took the lead and walked towards the door. However, before he could take 2 steps, the exquisite metal door carved with flowers and wild beasts closed in front of everyone with a bang. It was completely closed. At the same time. Bang, bang, 2 more bangs. The windows that were previously open were also tightly closed. All the exits that could be used to leave were sealed. As the doors and windows closed, the entire hall also dimmed. Such a scene made everyone's expression turn ugly. Qin Gu didn't believe it. He walked a few steps to the door and wanted to open it. However, the door seemed to be locked from the outside. He couldn't open it alone. Then, Qin Gu heard a hoarse voice, "Young man, do you need me to lend you a crowbar?" His whole body stiffened. Qin Gu paused and turned his head mechanically. An old woman in a black robe was holding a crowbar in her hand and smiling at him eerily. Qin Gu took a deep breath. Without saying a word, he ran towards the place where everyone was waiting. The rest of the people were also frightened by the old woman who suddenly appeared. Qin Xingxing said with a trembling voice, "You. Which one of you saw clearly where did she come from?" Zhang Chao was so scared that he even dropped the camera in his hand. Qin Gu ran in front of them as fast as he could in his life. He couldn't speak at all and could only gasp in horror. Fortunately, the old woman didn't chase after him. She just stood there with the crowbar in her hand and maintained a smile on her face as she looked at everyone. Gu Xingyin gently closed her eyes. When she opened her eyes again, everything in her eyes had changed. Those gorgeous and exquisite furnishings were shattered in front of her eyes as if they were a dream. The entire castle was still the same as when she woke up in the morning. No, there was still something different. For example, how was that old woman in a black robe standing in front of the dilapidated door? It was clearly a skeleton with ghostly flames in its eyes. In the hall, the exquisite statue came to life once again. That's right, it was the female ghost that took a picture with Qin Xingxing last night. She walked out of the statue. Gu Xingyin looked at the skeleton at the door and nodded at the female ghost. Then, at the corner of the wall, the youth's figure appeared once again. Gu Xingyin's face turned paler and paler. It was only daybreak, was there a need for such a big fuss? At this moment, Qin Xingxing tugged at Gu Xingyin's sleeve. "Sister Lingshi, what should we do now?" Before Gu Xingyin could answer her question, the light in front of everyone changed again. The candles on the ceiling and walls were all lit up. Light and fire were supposed to bring hope to everyone, but at this moment, everyone couldn't help but shudder violently. Those flames were all dark blue nether fire. Where exactly are we? Xue Wan's voice already had a hint of sobbing. Gu Xingyin thought to herself, we're in a ghost castle. A ghost castle worthy of its name. Chapter 1746. At this moment, a sharp voice rang out in everyone's ears. Distinguished guests, welcome to the Ghost Castle's carnival. Along with the strange voice, 6 delicate plates appeared on the dining table in the hall. Each plate was covered with a lid, so no one could see what was inside. Then, everyone watched as the white statue suddenly moved. She turned into a very beautiful woman in a white dress. Qin Qingqing suddenly screamed. She's the female ghost who took a picture with me last night. The woman seemed to be attracted by Qin Qingqing's voice and looked over at everyone. Then, she slowly moved toward them. That's right, she moved without moving her feet. Qin Qingqing couldn't help but run toward the back. Her movement seemed to have triggered a switch, and everyone ran toward the back. But the stairs were behind the female ghost, so there wasn't much space for them. Soon, they were forced into a corner. Unexpectedly, the female ghost didn't do anything. She only said softly, "Distinguished guests, the ghost castle has prepared a sumptuous breakfast for you." She pointed at the dining table behind her. But who would dare to eat such a strange thing? Zhang Chao said, "We just had breakfast. Can we not eat?" Gu Xingyin, who was standing beside Zhang Chao, could feel his body trembling. "Not eating?" The female ghost repeated softly. Then, she raised her head and revealed a sinister smile. As soon as she smiled, her fair face turned pale, her beautiful eyes turned a wretched green, and her sharp teeth were exposed between her lips. "Not eating?" Her sinister smile echoed throughout the ghost castle. "If you don't eat, I'll eat you." How big of an impact was it to see a ghost at such a close distance? Qin Qingqing's eyes rolled back and she fainted. Shui Wan's legs went weak, and she fell into her boyfriend's arms. But her boyfriend wasn't much better than her. The two of them fell to the ground together. Then, Shui Wan felt that she seemed to have pressed on something. She subconsciously turned around and saw a child with a pale face looking at her faintly. "Auntie, you're crushing my hand, ah." After Qin Qingqing, Shui Wan also fainted. Gu Xingyin noticed that the men around her were trembling. In fact, Gu Xingyin was very impressed that they were still able to maintain their sanity. If she didn't have the skills given by the system, she would have followed in the footsteps of Qin Qingqing and Shui Wan. This was not the time to back down. Therefore, Gu Xingyin looked at the female ghost calmly and said, "Then let's eat breakfast." The female ghost slowly turned around to look at her. She seemed to be very curious about how this human could remain so calm. Only the heavens knew that Gu Xingyin's hands, which were hidden in his sleeves, were gripping the dagger so tightly that his palms were almost bruised. Fortunately, the female ghost didn't say anything after glancing at her. Instead, she turned around to lead the way. Right at this moment, Gu Xingyin gave Zhang Chao a look and glanced at the dagger in his hand. Zhang Chao understood. When the female ghost turned around, he suddenly took a step forward. The dagger in his hand fiercely slashed at the female ghost's body. Go to hell. Chapter 1747. Ah! The female ghost let out a shrill scream. Everyone could see that Zhang Chao's military knife had cut deeply into the female ghost's flesh, but no blood flowed out. However, the female ghost's scream meant that this thing was still harmful to her. Zhang Chao was delighted. He made up his mind and spun the knife in his hand before pulling it out. The knife was clean, but there was nothing on it. The female ghost seemed to have suffered quite a bit of damage. She turned around and looked at Zhang Chao eerily. Her shrill scream resounded throughout the castle. As if responding to her scream, the entire castle was suddenly filled with countless ghostly wails and howls. For a moment, a chilly wind blew. Everyone's ears were filled with those hair-raising sounds. Gu Xingyin said coldly, "Wake the two of them up." At this time, no one has time to take care of people who have fainted. Just as she was speaking, countless bright and dark shadows suddenly appeared in every corner. Those shadows were all staring at them maliciously. Qin Qingqing had just opened her eyes when she was frightened by the scene in front of her and almost fainted again. However, Gu Xingyin directly supported her. "If you faint, none of us will take care of you. At that time, you will lie on the ground alone and be eaten by those ghosts who have been hungry for hundreds of years." Bit by bit, your flesh and blood will be eaten by those ghosts who have been hungry for hundreds of years. In the end, you will become like them. Qin Xingxing screamed, "Don't say it. Don't say it." Only then did Gu Xingyin stop talking. On the other side, Shuiwan also looked at Gu Xingyin with a frightened face. Such a description was really too scary. The female ghost seemed to be the leader of these wandering ghosts. Her cold voice echoed faintly in the ghost castle. "These intruders will be our freshest food. I will offer their blood to the Duke to enjoy. The rest will be our most delicious food." There was a sound of agreement all around. The old woman at the gate said slowly, "But the Duke of this castle hasn't woken up for more than 1,000 years. Is it really okay for us to use his territory?" When they talked about the Duke, even their gloomy faces revealed traces of fear. Clearly, to these ghosts, the mysterious Duke who claimed to be the owner of this castle was an extremely terrifying existence. Unfortunately, these ghosts were using their own methods to communicate. Gu Xingyin and the other adventurers did not hear them at all. At this moment, they were nervous because of the approaching ghosts. Qin Xingxing began to cry. "I must be dreaming, right? This is all fake, right?" Gu Xingyin cruelly exposed her self-deception. "You're wrong. It's all true." She watched as the hole on the female ghost that Zhang Chao had stabbed earlier grew back on its own. It was as if ordinary weapons could cause damage to ghosts, but they were unable to truly kill them. Gu Xingyin was not the only one who saw this scene. Zhang Chao and the others naturally saw it too. It was because of this scene that they were truly in despair. How were they supposed to find a chance to survive in this hellish place? Chapter 1748. At this moment, Gu Xingyin's words gave them hope. "Don't be discouraged. We only need 10 days. We just need to hold on for 10 days. 10 days later, the gate of life will open." Her calm voice sounded in this ghost-infested area, pulling everyone's dispirited hearts back. Qin Xingxing looked at her in confusion. "How do you know?" The dagger in Gu Xingyin's hand flashed, and he cut off the arm of a ghost that was approaching him. The dagger looked small and seemed to be a sharp weapon that could cut iron like mud. Moreover, after the ghost screamed, a thick black fog appeared on its arm, and the wound couldn't heal. Gu Xingyin turned around and smiled at the 5 of them. "You just need to believe in me." In such an environment, in such a situation, if someone told you not to give up, the situation wasn't as bad as you thought. What would you think? The 5 of them didn't know what the others would think. But they chose to believe in her at this moment. They believed in Gu Xingyin and believed that they could win a chance of survival in this ghost purgatory. Even Qin Xingxing gripped the iron rod in her hand tightly. No one was not afraid of death. Who would be willing to give up any chance? If someone had told Qin Xingxing 2 days ago that she would pick up a rod and fight ghosts one day, she would have rolled her eyes. Qin Xingxing would have definitely rolled her eyes and suggested that she go to the hospital. But now, Qin Xingxing only regretted that she didn't take an extra weapon when Gu Xingyin reminded her. A person's potential was really limitless in a desperate situation. At least Gu Xingyin and the other 5 were able to resist this room full of ghosts for a while. However, that was all. No matter how powerful they were just ordinary humans living in modern society. There was no way they could compete with this kind of supernatural ability. Seeing a few hands suddenly reach out from the ground and grab onto Qin Xingxing, Gu Xingyin made a prompt decision. She threw the dagger in her hand towards that direction and quickly took out a triangular talisman from her pocket with her left hand. With a "pa" sound, she stuck it on the back of her left hand. A ghost tried to sneak up on Gu Xingyin from behind. The moment it came into contact with her body, green smoke began to rise from its hand. She screamed and quickly retreated, disappearing without a trace. "Stay close to me," Gu Xingyin shouted. They hurriedly did as they were told. Then, they realized that once they got close to Gu Xingyin, the ghosts could no longer get close to them. As long as they came into contact with him, they would emit black smoke and scream like normal people who had come into contact with flames. At this moment, everyone looked at Gu Xingyin as if they had seen their savior. Gu Shengyin coughed dryly. Some self-defense items. The few of them stood close together. Gu Shengyin said, "Everyone, sit down. Pay attention, just stay close to me." Just now, everyone's nerves were tense to the extreme. Naturally, they all sat down obediently. After suffering a few losses, those ghosts seemed to have understood that there seemed to be something terrifying on these humans that they could not get close to. Most of the ghosts disappeared into the darkness. Only a few of them, led by the female statue, were still standing not far away, staring at them. Even if they knew that there was no danger, seeing those sinister and terrifying ghosts staring at them, this feeling was not something that ordinary people could bear. Qin Xingxing could not help but squeeze in again. She said in a trembling voice, "What should we do next?" Chapter 1749. The others were silent. To be honest, Qin Xingxing's question was exactly what everyone was thinking about right now. Including Gu Shengyin. Gu Shengyin asked the system to confirm that those ghosts would not be in the mood to eavesdrop on their conversation. Then, she slowly opened her mouth and said, "Let me tell you some information that I know." As soon as she said this, the others looked at her with hope in their eyes. Gu Shengyin said, "This ghost castle is now completely sealed off. In other words, don't think that you can run out of the gate. This place has been sealed off by a barrier. You can't get out." She ignored the despair in the other's eyes and continued, "However, it's not completely impossible. Every 10 days, the door of life and death will change. We will have a chance to get out." She raised her head and glanced at the 5 of them one by one. She said word by word, "So, as long as we can hold on for 10 days, we will have a chance of survival." Following her words, everyone's eyes lit up one after another. However, Qin Gu only looked at Gu Shengyin strangely. "You don't look very happy." Gu Shengyin said, "Because I only told you the good news and didn't tell you the bad news." As soon as she said this, she felt everyone's eyes gather on her face. Gu Shengyin smiled helplessly. "The worst news is," she raised her left hand. On it was the triangular talisman. "This talisman has a duration of 24 hours. I only have 5 in total." Everyone's expressions changed. This meant that they could only live peacefully for 5 days. In the remaining 5 days, they had to face the ghosts of the entire ancient castle. Thinking of the ghosts that surrounded her just now, Qin Xingxing's body could not help but tremble. "This is impossible. We can't hold on for so long." The others' faces were also filled with despair. Qin Xingxing started crying alone. "I regret it. I regret it. I shouldn't have disobeyed my mother and taken the money from home to come to this place alone. Now that my mother can't contact me and can't find me, she must be worried to death." Gu Shengyin glanced at the ghost that was attracted by Qin Xingxing's crying. She couldn't help frowning and scolding her, "Qin Xingxing, shut up." Among the 6 of them, Qin Xingxing could be said to be the backbone. Therefore, after being scolded like this, Qin Xingxing really did not dare to say anything. Gu Shengyin whispered, "What's the use of crying now? How many times have I told you to turn back and not come here? Did any of you listen?" When she said this, the others thought about it carefully and realized that it was true. Along the way, Ling Shi had indeed told them not to come to the ghost castle several times. Gu Shengyin said faintly, "What we need to do now is to think about how to fight for more time. No one should give up until the last moment." At this moment, Qin Gu suddenly looked at Gu Shengyin. "I remember that along the way, you reminded us many times and hinted for us to turn back. Why? Could it be that you knew that we would encounter such a thing this time?" His gaze was fixed on Gu Shengyin. Gu Shengyin thought to herself, as expected of horror novels. Their imagination was indeed bigger than ordinary people's. Chapter 1750. The rest of the people also looked at Gu Shengyin, wanting to know her answer. They felt that it was very strange. If Gu Shengyin didn't know anything, why would she remind them again and again? If she knew everything, why would she still come to this ghost castle knowing that she would die? Thinking about it again, before they came here, Gu Shengyin told the driver that she would pick them up in 10 days. They all felt that Gu Xingyin's entire body was covered in a layer of fog. Gu Xingyin knew that there were some things that she definitely had to give an explanation for. She sighed and said, I remember that when I was replenishing food in that small village, I once told you that I learned some yin-yang profound techniques. Of course, everyone remembered. They still remembered the thunderbolt in broad daylight. Gu Xingyin said half-truthfully, before I came here, I had a divination. The divination showed that it was a great calamity. Qin Xingxing listened attentively and complained, since you knew it was a great calamity, why didn't you organize us to come here? Gu Xingyin glanced at her and sneered, touch your heart and ask carefully, Qin Xingxing, did I stop you? Qin Xingxing's expression changed and she didn't say anything else. Qin Gu spoke again, since the divination showed that it was a great calamity, why did you still insist on coming? Gu Xingyin sighed helplessly, the secrets of heaven can't be revealed. Since I used this matter for divination, it means that I've already gotten involved. Even if I don't want to participate, the heavenly Tao won't tolerate it. Moreover, you all heard the thunderbolt in the clear sky earlier. I can't tell anyone about this matter at all. So I can only try my best to prepare and hope that I can last until 10 days later. After Gu Xingyin said this, she let them leave. After knowing that they wouldn't leave, she asked a few people to prepare weapons and food. All of this was understandable. To put it bluntly, Gu Xingyin wanted to say something. It was fine if they understood because they didn't need to waste their breath. But even if they didn't understand, they still had to understand. Now, in this ancient castle, she, Gu Xingyin, was almost the most powerful force they could rely on. Gu Xingyin looked at Qin Xingxing. If you have any questions, it's best to ask them all at once. I'll answer you now. After that, I won't have the mood and time to do so. She said this mainly for Qin Xingxing to hear. After all, Gu Xingyin was amazed by the things he did in the original plot. She did not want to be implicated by her when the time came. Hearing Gu Xingyin's words, Qin Xingxing's expression changed. She lowered her head and said, no problem. Gu Xingyin said, nothing will happen to us for the time being. Let's think about it and see if we can come up with a solution. Everyone fell silent for a moment. Everyone was racking their brains to think of a solution. But how could it be so easy to think of a solution? Now, what was in front of them was almost equivalent to a dead end. Gu Xingyin thought of countless repulsive ideas, but when she thought about it in her mind, she found that it was completely impossible. There was no solution. She raised her hand and looked at the time. Everyone, let's eat something first. Hearing Gu Xingyin's words, everyone silently picked up their backpacks. A few people saw their backpacks full of food and thanked Gu Xingyin. If it weren't for her, they would have been carrying 3 or 4 days' worth of food. At that time, even if they were not killed by these ghosts, they would probably starve to death here. Chapter 1751. The few of them ate in silence. At a time like this, not many people had an appetite. In addition, not far away, there were a few malicious ghosts staring at them with their pale green eyes. Under the control of despair and fear, everyone had no appetite at all. However, Gu Xingyin said sternly, even if you can't eat, you have to eat. You have to stuff it in. If you don't eat, you can't guarantee that your body has enough strength and energy. When the time comes, even if there's a chance in front of you, you won't have the strength to run out. Then, they realized that the ghosts who had been watching them had moved. Perhaps it was because they saw them eating, the ghosts turned their heads sluggishly. Then, the young noble-looking ghost said something to the female ghost, and the ghosts moved toward the dining table. They still remembered the dining table with snow-white cutlery and 6 exquisite plates on it. It was said that the ghosts had prepared the food for them. However, looking at the current situation, they seemed to be preparing to enjoy it for themselves. They watched as the ghosts slowly removed the covers on the bowls with their hands, picked up the knives and forks, and prepared to eat. Unfortunately, the few people present had excellent eyesight. Therefore, everyone saw clearly what the ghosts were eating. On the plates, there was a bloody human palm. Ugh! Xue Wan was the first to lose control. She turned sideways and vomited all the food that she had forced herself to eat. Her reaction obviously stimulated the others. One after another, except for Gu Xingyin and Zhang Chao, everyone else vomited. Gu Xingyin's heart was actually a little turbulent. However, she didn't expect that this skill of being as steady as Mount Tai could not only affect the body, but also control the physiological reaction. She was able to stand firm in such an environment. As for the other Zhang Chao, he relied on his own ability. Gu Xingyin secretly admired them in her heart. Everyone turned their heads to avoid looking in that direction, but the sounds of chewing and tearing rang clearly in their ears. Qin Xingxing reached out and grabbed her hair. "I'm really going crazy." Actually, it wasn't just her. Everyone felt their scalps go numb. They were all wondering if they would be the ones at the ghost's table in a few days' time. Gu Xingyin's heart also felt numb. She began to crazily force herself to think of a way. She must think of a way. She absolutely could not sit and wait for death. Time passed bit by bit. The first 24 hours passed. Gu Xingyin signaled everyone with her eyes, but no one moved. They were trying their luck and stalling for time. They prayed in their hearts that the ghosts wouldn't know that their charms had lost their effect. What if they were lucky enough to drag out the 10 days? However, it turned out that even Lady Luck was not on their side. In less than 10 minutes, Qin Xingxing screamed. A pale hand suddenly reached out from the ground and grabbed her calf. Soon after, an equally pale face emerged from the ground, revealing a row of white teeth as it opened its mouth at her. Qin Xingxing was dumbfounded. She didn't even remember to resist. Fortunately, Qin Gu, who was sitting next to her, reacted quickly and hit the ghost's hand with a stick. Perhaps the ghost was in pain, so it shrank back into the ground and disappeared. However, the commotion here had once again attracted the attention of the ghosts. The 7th update. There are 3 more updates before 12 o'clock. See you later. Chapter 1752. Looking at the ghosts who were closing in on them once again, Gu Xingyin could only take out another piece of talisman paper and stick it on her hand. The few of them heaved a sigh of relief once again. But Gu Xingyin's mood didn't relax because of this. This was the second piece of talisman paper. It could still be peaceful for 4 more days. Then what about after 4 days? After 4 days, there were still 5 more days. How were they going to spend the next 5 days? Gu Xingyin started to discuss with the system. Is it possible for you to arrange a certain death mission for me that is completely impossible to complete? The system's white light flashed. Host, this kind of thing is impossible. The system doesn't decide which world to go to and the system doesn't know everything. But the system can tell the host with certainty that any mission can be completed. Gu Xingyin's heart suddenly calmed down. Although the system didn't say anything effective, but at least Gu Xingyin knew that at least, she didn't have no hope of survival. As long as it wasn't an unsolvable hopeless situation, there would definitely be a way. Gu Xingyin said to the other 5 people, I just did a silent divination in my heart. It's not like we have no hope. Everyone's eyes lit up at once. Gu Xingyin said with a calm face, the result I just got is that there is a 9 out of 10 chance of survival. In other words, although this ancient castle is filled with danger, we still have a chance of survival. As long as we can find it, we will definitely be able to get out alive. Qin Xingxing looked suspiciously at Gu Xingyin. Is what you said true? You're really not lying to us? Gu Xingyin glanced at her and said, then tell me, Qin Xingxing, we've already come to this point. What's the point of me using this kind of thing to lie to you? She really didn't like to deal with people like Qin Xingxing. It was really tiring. Qin Xingxing choked on her words again and could only choke. Even if there is a way, who knows if we can find it or not. 9 out of 10 chance of survival means that the probability of dying is much higher than surviving. This time, Gu Xingyin didn't even need to say anything. Everyone else's expression didn't look good. When they heard Gu Xingyin's words, they had the greatest desire for survival. However, Qin Xingxing kept pouring cold water on them. No matter who it was, who could stand it? Even Shui Wan, who had always been good-tempered, couldn't help but say, Ching, this method was thought of by humans. You have to find your own way out. Could it be that according to what you said, since we don't have any hope, why don't we just sit here and wait for death? Sit here? Gu Xingyin suddenly had an idea. She suddenly recalled the original plot. In the original plot, the 6 of them didn't have any amulets or gold fingers. But in the end, Qin Qingqing survived. In the beginning, after reading the plot, she thought that those people had all died in the illusion created by the ghosts, and Qin Qingqing had escaped because she had gone crazy. But now that she thought about it, she realized that it wasn't like that. These ghosts would really fight on their own. According to what she had experienced, Qin Qingqing definitely wouldn't be able to survive in this place for 10 days. So, this meant that in the original plot, Qin Qingqing had actually accidentally found the only way out? Gu Xingyin started to recall the original plot bit by bit. To be honest, the description in the original plot was quite gory. But in order to find the result, Gu Xingyin had no choice but to bite the bullet and read on carefully, not missing a single word. Chapter 1753. She ignored the bloody details about how people died. Gu Xingyin finally saw the moment when Qin Qingqing was alone. There were ghosts chasing after her. In a panic, she pushed aside a ghost that was blocking her way and ran upstairs. Behind her, Qin Qingqing went crazy. There was no more detailed description of it. But Gu Xingyin suddenly caught a detail, upstairs. Could it be that the key to Qin Qingqing's survival was upstairs? Gu Xingyin's heart suddenly jumped. This time, it was not because of fear, but excitement. She suddenly turned her head and said to a person with a drooping head, "I have a guess." Everyone looked at her blankly. Gu Xingyin saw their expressions and sighed, "Cheer up. We are not at the end of our rope yet. Think about it. We are sitting in the castle, eating, and watching the best horror movie in the world. What is there to be dissatisfied with?" Even in such an environment, Gu Xingyin's lame jokes still made people laugh. Zhang Chao was the first to laugh out loud. "Ling Shi is right. We are not at the end of our rope yet. What are we afraid of?" Gu Xingyin liked such smart people the most. Zhang Chao asked her at this time, "What guess do you have?" Gu Xingyin didn't want to tell them that upstairs was probably their only hope of survival. After all, it was just a guess. If it was wrong, wouldn't it be even more unbearable if they lost hope when there was hope? She just said in a low voice, "We can't keep sitting here. I want to go to the second floor and see if there is anything." As soon as she said this, everyone looked at the place where the statue of the female ghost was. The place where the statue was located happened to be at the top of the stairs. This also meant that if they wanted to go to the second floor, they had to go through the statue of the female ghost. And everyone looked at the stairs. The castle was too big, and the stairs were very wide and long. At least from their point of view, they could only see that the stairs seemed to be inlaid with gold extending all the way up and then disappeared into the invisible darkness. It was frightening for no reason. Qin Qingqing was the first to cower. Who knows if there's something even scarier on the second floor? Gu Xingyin lightly interrupted her, "Then tell me, what's the difference between meeting a ghost and meeting a group of ghosts? Do you think we'll meet anything other than ghosts on the second floor?" She then looked at the others. Zhang Chao was the first to express his willingness. "Sitting here is a waste of time. Why don't we give it a try?" Several men expressed their willingness to give it a try. Shuewan was a little scared, but she still nodded. In fact, everyone knew that in their current situation, the most foolish thing to do was to sit there and not move. However, they knew that they wouldn't be in danger as they sat there. However, if they went up to the second floor, no one could predict what would happen next. Opportunity is always accompanied by risk. Gu Xingyin only said this one sentence. Qin Qingqing thought for a while and finally stood up. Gu Xingyin asked everyone to carry their bags. This was something that could not be damaged. She seriously reminded them, "I don't know if those ghosts will stop us when we go upstairs. Everyone just needs to remember one thing. Stay close to each other. In this way, those ghosts won't be able to get close to us. No matter what happens, don't be afraid." They can't hurt us. Chapter 1754. Everyone nodded. However, when they were really faced with it, they realized how difficult it was to do it even though they knew it in their hearts. The group of people slowly stood up and leaned against each other. The hand that leaned outside held a weapon. They began to move toward the middle of the living room. As the only humans left in this ghost castle, their movements obviously attracted the attention of countless ghosts. Then, everyone understood what it meant to challenge the limit. As they walked, countless hands appeared on the ground. It was as if you took one more step forward, those hands would climb up and grab your pants, drag your legs, and drag you to hell. Fortunately, Gu Shengyin was walking at the front. Although she felt that her heart was about to stop, on the surface, she was still calm and unruffled, as if she didn't see anything. She unswervingly continued to step forward. Then, those hands that were blocking the way hurriedly retracted as if they had met their natural enemy. In an instant, the entire ghost castle was filled with a chilly wind, and the sound of ghosts crying could be heard. Everyone's body was trembling. In fact, they could not even tell if they were trembling or if their companions were trembling. Of course, the truth was that everyone was trembling. Gu Shengyin breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. Even if she believed in the quality of the system's products, when she saw those things, she was still afraid. They would drag her to hell. This is really, too exciting. Zhang Chao's face was stiff, and he squeezed the words out from between his teeth. He could still barely speak, but the others were so nervous that they were tongue-tied. There was only one thought in their minds: never let go, they can't touch me. There was nothing else. Then, they quickly reached the staircase. Gu Shengyin's movements almost imperceptibly paused. That was because the female statue was standing there, looking at them sinisterly. She had already removed that layer of beautiful disguise. On the green and white ghostly face, the pale eyes stared straight at them. She reached out her hand with the same pale green fingernails, and made a grabbing gesture at Gu Shengyin and the others. Qin Xingxing was scared to tears again. Let's not go, okay? Not going, I really don't want to go. As if responding to her words, the female ghost let out a burst of gloomy laughter that echoed in everyone's ears. Gu Shengyin felt cold sweat trickling down his forehead. She was really scared. But he had no choice even if he was afraid. She said sternly, Qin Xingxing, shut up. If you're afraid, you have to clench your teeth. She can't touch you, so what are you afraid of? Tell me, what are you afraid of? If you can walk with your eyes closed, you will. But let me tell you, if you fall behind alone, no one will save you. Qin Xingxing was so scared that she didn't dare to speak. Everyone could feel that she was squeezing in even more. To be honest, everyone was already squeezed very tightly, and this was already very uncomfortable. However, no one objected to this. They even felt that at this time, only by relying on each other tightly could they give themselves a little sense of security. Gu Shengyin's words were not only said to Qin Xingxing, but also to herself. She looked at the female statue ghost not far away in front of her, gritted her teeth, and walked straight towards her. Phew, the 10,000 chapters were finally finished. I won't tell you that when I was writing this, I was sitting alone in a very big room with a window behind me, imagining the plot in my mind. I'm probably already a useless branch, really. I'll only write the male lead tomorrow. Please give me a vote, please bless me with no nightmares tonight. Good night. Chapter 1755. Bit by bit. She was getting closer and closer. Gu Shengyin had already walked to the side of the female ghost statue. If the female ghost stood still, she would directly bump into her. Gu Shengyin took a deep breath in her heart and then, without hesitation, she stepped in the direction of the female ghost. The female ghost suddenly opened her mouth. Everyone saw clearly that the female ghost's mouth suddenly enlarged infinitely, as if it had become an endless black hole. It was a real bloody mouth. And if Gu Shengyin took another step forward, the brain hole would directly bump into her mouth. Xue Wan, who was tightly pressed against Gu Shengyin, subconsciously stopped in her tracks. Gu Shengyin's body stopped. She raised her head and looked at the bloody mouth that revealed its sharp teeth. It was very close to her. It was so close that if she moved forward a little bit, she might be doomed eternally. It was such a horrible scene, but Gu Xingyin laughed. She said lightly, "I'm not afraid. What are you afraid of? She can only scare me." Yes, she was sure in her heart that this female ghost couldn't do anything to her. Even in such a situation, she only dared to scare him from behind. If she could really do anything to her, how could she still maintain this ridiculous posture? After saying that, she put some strength in her feet. Her whole body directly bumped into the female ghost. Gu Xingyin didn't feel anything. It was as if she was walking normally, and she didn't even notice that she had bumped into something. But everyone saw clearly that when the female ghost was bumped into by Gu Xingyin, her whole body was like a broken mirror, shattering into countless pieces with a crash, and disappearing like a phantom. Gu Xingyin continued to walk up without hesitation. After Qin Xingxing walked up, she suddenly turned her head. When she turned around, she almost screamed again. At the place where the female statue had shattered, there was another female ghost that looked exactly the same as the one that had shattered. Seeing Qin Xingxing turn around, the female ghost raised her head and gave her a sinister smile. Then, she stretched out her arm. That arm seemed to be able to extend infinitely. Qin Xingxing saw it reach out in front of her and was about to grab her leg in the next moment. Qin Xingxing subconsciously wanted to run up the stairs. If he ran upwards, he would be able to get rid of this female ghost. Just as she was about to run away, she remembered Gu Xingyin's stern words. Qin Xingxing's heart quivered. She suppressed the fear in her heart and closed her eyes tightly. I can't run. I can't leave everyone. She can't hurt me, nothing happened. When Qin Xingxing opened her eyes again, she saw that the female ghost statue was still standing in the same place, looking at her with resentment and unwillingness. Qin Xingxing's heart suddenly relaxed. When she looked at these ghosts again, even though she was still afraid, she no longer felt like she had lost her ability to think. It was probably growth after experiencing life and death. At this time, Qin Xingxing suddenly realized that because she had closed her eyes in fear and didn't move her feet, everyone seemed to be standing on the stairs without moving. She turned around and saw that everyone was looking at her. Qin Xingxing was a little embarrassed. I'm sorry, I'm holding everyone back again. This time, Gu Xingyin, who had always despised her, softened her expression. It's okay, let's continue. Chapter 1756. On this short flight of stairs, Gu Xingyin was blocked several times. Those ghosts did not seem to want them to go upstairs at all. Although Gu Xingyin was a little nervous, the hope in her heart grew. In her opinion, the more these ghosts behaved like this, the more likely there was something incredible upstairs. Finally, they stepped onto the last step of the second floor. Gu Xingyin heaved a sigh of relief. She looked sideways at the long and old corridor. With just one look, her heart sank. At the end of the corridor, an old lady with a face full of wrinkles was looking at them expressionlessly. This old lady did not have a ghostly aura. She was wearing a long black dress, and her expression was harsh and strict. She looked like an old madam from a wealthy family in ancient dramas. However, she appeared in a place like this, and dressed like this. Even if Gu Xingyin believed that she was not a ghost, she could not do it. The only explanation was that this old lady, who did not have a hint of ghostly aura, was a ghost that was scarier than the ghosts downstairs. This realization made Gu Xingyin shudder. The other people also looked at the old lady with vigilance. The next moment, they were shocked to find that the old lady, who was standing far away at the end of the corridor, had appeared in front of them. Gu Xingyin felt a chill in her heart. Although the ghosts downstairs appeared and disappeared mysteriously, she could still see their movements. However, even with her psychic eye, she could not see the old lady's movements clearly. It was as if she had really teleported here. The only hope now was that the talisman given by the system would be effective on her. Fortunately, the old lady only came to their side, but did not touch them directly. The system said confidently, "Host, please rest assured. The guanine soul-subduing talisman produced by the system is of absolute quality. Not to mention a ghost of this level, even a ghost king would not be able to break it. All right. Gu Shengyin sighed in relief. A reprieve was more hopeful than a direct death sentence. Upon closer inspection, one could see that the old lady's complexion was green. It was not the color of a living person's skin. Looking down, he could see spots of yellow livor mortis on the back of her shriveled hand. However, compared to the group of ghosts downstairs, the old lady's appearance was much more normal. Moreover, she didn't seem to have much of an appetite for them. Yes, appetite. Gu Shengyin thought about the way the female statue and the other ghosts looked at them. It was as if they were drooling over delicious food. It was very uncomfortable to look at them. However, this old lady was different. The way she looked at him was not like she was looking at food, but like she was looking at a stranger who had disturbed her. There was only disgust. The old lady stood some distance away from the crowd and actually began to speak. Her voice was like an old tree bark that had been dried up for countless years. When it was swept up by the north wind, it let out a hoarse and painful cry, making people who heard it couldn't help but have goosebumps. Humans, this is not a place for you to come. Get down. She spoke slowly, but clearly. This old lady seemed to still retain a relatively clear consciousness. However, her words were somewhat unacceptable to the crowd. Get down? Who didn't know that there was a group of malicious ghosts waiting for them downstairs? Going down to die? Chapter 1757. Gu Shengyin said calmly, "It was an accident that we came to this place. We also want to leave this castle very much. Do you have any way to get us out of here?" As soon as she asked, the rest of the people also pricked up their ears. What if they were lucky enough to meet a kind-hearted ghost who didn't like to eat people and sent them out? Then they heard the old woman's cold voice. Every 10 days, there will be an alternation between the living and the dead in this castle. That is also the only time when living people can come in. Since you are unlucky enough to come here, don't think about getting out before the next alternation between the living and the dead. Everyone felt a chill in their hearts when they heard that. At the same time, they admired Gu Shengyin more and more in their hearts. It was just as she had predicted. They would have to stay in this place for at least 10 days before they could get out. Seeing that the old woman didn't seem to have any intention of being enemies with them, Zhang Chao mustered up his courage and said, "Madam, can we borrow your place and stay for a few days? After 9 days, we will get out." The old woman slowly turned her head to look at Zhang Chao. Everyone was almost in a circle, and Zhang Chao happened to be in the opposite direction of Gu Shengyin. Everyone saw that her body didn't move, but her head seemed to turn in a circle and looked straight at Zhang Chao. This strange scene caused Zhang Chao to shiver. It was too creepy. The old woman's voice suddenly became sharp. "No. Living people are not allowed to enter here. You must leave immediately, leave this place." Gu Shengyin said, "There are countless malicious ghosts who want our lives. We can't go down to die." The old woman suddenly laughed strangely, and extremely sharp fingernails suddenly grew out of her hands. Looking at everyone coldly, the old woman's eyes flashed with a strange light. "Do you think that I won't kill you if you stay on the second floor?" Seeing the old woman's appearance, she frowned. This development was not right. If this old woman on the second floor, who was obviously more powerful, also knew how to kill, how did Qin Qingqing survive? Gu Shengyin felt a little confused. It wasn't a good feeling to think that you had found hope, only to have reality give you a cold slap. She forced herself to calm down. There must be something wrong. There must be a way. Gu Shengyin tried to reason with the old woman. "We don't mean any harm, and we won't disturb your life. We just want to find a place to stay for a while. Why can't you tolerate us?" However, the old woman couldn't listen to him at all. She just coldly told them to scram. Gu Shengyin simply ignored her. She said to her companions behind her, "It seems that my guess is wrong. The second floor doesn't give us any hope." She sounded apologetic. Unexpectedly, this time, Qin Qingqing was the first to comfort her. "It doesn't matter, Not to mention anything else, at least compared to the dancing demons in the hall, this place isn't so unsightly. As soon as she said this, everyone couldn't help but laugh. That was true. On the entire second floor, other than the dark corridor, it seemed that the old woman was the only ghost that existed. Chapter 1758. Gu Xingyin's eyes slowly scanned the entire second floor. They were now at the top of the stairs that led up from the first floor. The stairs stopped here. Where they were, there were only a few mottled walls, and then, there was a corridor that extended endlessly to the other side. Gu Xingyin thought for a moment. If Qin Xingxing in the original plot ran up the stairs that they had walked up, then, as a lunatic with mental problems, the most likely thing she would do was to run forward when she saw the road. There was no road here, so there was only a corridor left. Could it be that there was a secret at the end of the corridor? Gu Xingyin glanced around. The corridor was like a dim passage, and the place where the old woman first appeared was at the end of the corridor. Gu Xingyin said in a low voice, "Are you willing to follow me to the end? Since this is not our destination, let's continue forward." They all expressed that there was no problem. The old woman seemed to have heard their words. She said sharply, "You're not allowed to leave. Get down, get down." However, she could only scream. She tried to attack Gu Xingyin and the others, but every time, before she could touch anyone, there would be bursts of black smoke on her hand, accompanied by a burning pain. No one had been able to bring her pain for thousands of years. Seeing the old woman like this, her heart calmed down. She can't hurt us. We still have enough time. Take it slow. We'll find a way. She slowly walked towards the corridor. The old woman tried to stop them again and again, even if it meant that she would get injured again and again. Moreover, as they walked forward, the doors of the rooms in the corridor opened one by one. One by one, stiff people walked out and blocked their way expressionlessly. Qin Xingxing almost screamed. Could it be that the old woman wasn't the only ghost on the second floor? Gu Xingyin, on the other hand, scanned with her spiritual eye and found that the corridor was empty. These things were all illusions made by the old woman to stop them. All of you, close your eyes. These are all illusions. Just hold on to me and follow me. She shouted loudly. These illusions were too realistic. She was afraid that those people would take them seriously. Everyone did as they were told. Although they didn't know how Gu Xingyi knew that these were all illusions, they were already used to listening to her. Everyone walked forward slowly. Gu Xingyin looked at this dark and quiet corridor, and there were always all kinds of illusions. For example, as they walked, a chandelier suddenly fell down on their heads, as if in the next moment, they would be bleeding. Or perhaps the floor would suddenly collapse, and there would be cold knife tips below. If they fell, their intestines would be pierced through. Without the psychic eye, Gu Xingyin felt that he probably wouldn't have been able to get out of the illusion. She knew a lot about illusions. She knew that as long as one's heart was shaken, the environment would take advantage of it. In such an environment, once they fell into the illusion, this old woman probably had more than 100 ways to take their lives without touching them. Gu Xingyin ignored the old woman's disbelief and resentment. Finally, she walked to the end of the corridor without changing her expression. The moment she stepped into the end, she thought she had walked into heaven. Chapter 1759. It was just the difference between taking a step forward and taking a step back. It was like the difference between heaven and hell. Gu Xingyin stared at the scene in front of her for a long time in a daze. The others had their eyes closed. Now that they felt that Gu Xingyin suddenly stopped moving, they all felt strange and opened their eyes. Then, they couldn't help but open their mouths. What appeared in front of everyone was warm and bright light. A sparkling and translucent crystal staircase appeared under everyone's feet. On every step, the same transparent pattern was engraved, reflecting a beautiful light under the light. On both sides of the staircase, there were fresh flowers with dew, blooming in the most beautiful moment of their lives. The crystal staircase wound up, making it impossible for people to see the scene behind, but it didn't make people feel afraid. It only made people yearn for it. Who knew what kind of scenery would be at the bottom of this exquisite staircase? Qin Xingxing looked at the perfumed lily in a vase not far in front of her and had the urge to cry. Although she had only been here for a short day, she felt as if she was a lifetime away from the normal life she had before. She couldn't help but want to reach out and touch the petals in front of her, but her arm was pulled hard by Zhang Chao. Zhang Chao frowned and looked at her. Are you crazy? You dare to believe the things in this place? Qin Xingxing recalled the scene in the hall. She suddenly shuddered and woke up from her trance. Everyone looked at Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin looked carefully for a long time and finally said slowly, "No, these are not illusions." Under everyone's widened eyes, she gave a definite answer. "These are all real." Xue Wan couldn't help but cover her mouth with her hand. This was really too shocking. Perhaps the scene in front of them was too shocking. For a moment, everyone didn't know what to do. They could only look at Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin turned her head. She saw that the solemn and gloomy old woman was looking at them with hatred. She was standing in the shadows not far from everyone. The two sides were in two completely different worlds. One step into heaven, one step into hell. That's not a place you should go. Come out. The old woman called out to them in a hoarse voice. However, she was obviously worried about something and didn't dare to approach him. Gu Xingyin suddenly felt relieved. She thought that she had probably found the reason why Qin Xingxing was still alive. In the original plot, Qin Xingxing probably stumbled into this place by accident. She burst out laughing. This time, it wasn't to pretend to be calm. Instead, it was a genuine smile of relief. She said, "Everyone, let go. I think we're probably safe now." Everyone was overjoyed to hear this. Zhang Chao said hesitantly, "Lingshe, are you sure?" Gu Xingyin said, "What I know is that those ghosts don't dare to come close to this place." As for above, she pointed at the crystal staircase and said, "I'm not sure what will be there." As she spoke, she was the first to loosen her grip. At first, everyone was very nervous, afraid that something would happen. They all gripped their weapons tightly. After a while, they realized that nothing had happened. Looking at Gu Xingyin, who sat on the stairs with a natural expression and took out a bottle of water to drink, everyone burst into cheers. They were saved. Chapter 1760. Everyone sat on the ground, and the two girls no longer looked lonely as they sat down on the ground. They slowly took out the food in their backpacks. For the first time in a day and night, they finished a meal normally. As Qin Xingxing ate, she suddenly started crying. She was still biting the bread in her mouth. As she ate, she cried. "I never knew that sitting and eating bread like this was such a blissful thing." She really didn't look good like this, but no one laughed at her. Because almost everyone's eyes turned red when they looked at Qin Xingxing. Only Gu Xingyin was still eating slowly with a calm expression. Then, she realized that everyone was looking at her. Gu Xingyin's first reaction was, did something appear behind her again? She didn't look back. She quickly rolled on the ground and left the area she was previously in. Then, she looked up and saw nothing. Gu Xingyin, she looked at everyone. "Why are you looking at me?" The other 5 people were obviously stunned by her actions just now. They were stunned for a while before they realized that Gu Xingyin had misunderstood something. Ha 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 ha. There was a burst of laughter. They felt that they hadn't laughed so happily in a long time. Zhang Chao finally stopped laughing. He wiped the tears from the corner of his eyes. "Lingshe, don't misunderstand. There are no ghosts here. We just feel that we are really grateful to you along the way. If it weren't for you, we really don't know how many times we would have died." After he said this, the others couldn't help but nod. Qin Xingxing also said, "Thank you so much, Sister Lingshe. I know that my personality isn't good, but under such circumstances, you didn't abandon me. I'm really grateful." The others also expressed their gratitude. Even Qin Gu, who had always been silent, had a stiff face and thanked Gu Xingyin. After this incident, the estrangement between them seemed to have lessened a lot. Gu Shengyin glanced at the corridor and found that the old woman had disappeared. Most likely, he knew that there was nothing he could do to them, so he left. Qin Xingxing noticed Gu Shengyin's actions and also raised her head to take a look. She suddenly stood up and walked up a few steps, keeping her gaze away from the corridor. It wasn't easy for me to relax. I don't want to see those things again, she complained. Everyone felt that this was the case. Thus, all of them went up a few steps and left the dim corridor behind. At this moment, Qin Xingxing suddenly looked up. She whispered, "I don't know what's on top of it." As soon as she said this, the others also became restless. Then, they all looked at Gu Shengyin. Along the way, they seemed to have gotten used to letting Gu Shengyin be their leader. Gu Shengyin was curious as well. She asked the system, "Do you know what's at the top of the stairs?" The system shook its head very honestly. "I don't know." Gu Shengyin, the system expressed that it was very innocent. The system has no way of knowing things that didn't appear in the plot. Chapter 1761. As soon as Gu Shengyin came back to her senses, she met 5 pairs of inquiring eyes. She thought for a moment and said, "Everyone is very tense today and should be in a rather tired state now. How about this, let's take a rest first and have a good sleep. When we're well rested, we'll go up and explore. What do you think?" The others also thought that this was a good idea. Gu Shengyin assigned them casually. "Start with me, then Zhang Chao, Qin Xingxing, Qin Gu, and then Shui Wan. You two decide yourselves. Each of you will guard for an hour. Rest well first, then we'll talk about other things." No matter how safe this place looked, they still had to be vigilant. Okay. The crystal steps were very spacious, and each step was more than enough for one person to sleep. Because of the peace of mind, and the heavy shackles in their hearts were removed, everyone fell asleep immediately. Gu Shengyin quietly looked at this almost illusory scene alone and secretly prayed that there would be no more twists and turns. Time passed quickly. After everyone had slept their fill, everyone stood up energetically. Gu Shengyin still took the lead. She held a dagger in her hand and slowly walked forward. Nothing unexpected happened. There would be a turn after every 9 steps. Gu Shengyin counted every turn he took until he reached the 9th turn. Finally, there were no more spiral steps in front of him. They had reached the end. Gu Shengyin clenched the dagger in her hand and said in a low voice, "Everyone, be careful." Everyone expressed that they understood. Then, they slowly made their way to the top. What greeted their eyes was, it was a very big room. The floor of this room was covered with a thick lavender velvet carpet. On the left wall, there was a huge Western-style wall clock. The room was very orderly. The people present might not be able to recognize every piece of furniture and decoration, but they could see the nobility and luxury with their eyes. It could be imagined that the owner of this room should be a person of high status who paid great attention to the quality of life. Qin Xingxing suddenly exclaimed in a small voice. Everyone followed her gaze. It turned out that there was a huge oil painting hanging on the wall on the right, probably above the main chair for receiving guests. Due to the position they occupied after ascending the stairs, they did not see this at first glance. This was a man who could easily take away everyone's breath and gaze. His long black hair was tied up high, revealing a pair of eyes that were even more mysterious and enchanting than the most beautiful amethyst. His facial features were so deep and perfect that they seemed to have been carefully sculpted. The corners of his lips curled up slightly as if he had seen something that made him happy. Continuing to look, the person in the painting was riding on a white horse. In his hand was a longbow inlaid with gems. Obviously, he was hunting. Judging from his joyful expression, he must have hunted a decent prey. Looking at his riding attire, it was obvious that this attire was from at least a few centuries ago. It should have been a painter back then who had faithfully recorded this scene. What a beautiful person, Qin Xingxing murmured. Her eyes lit up. Compared to the people in this painting, the few male celebrities I've chased before are simply repulsive. Everyone nodded in deep agreement. Zhang Chao muttered, maybe the painter deliberately painted him to look good in order to please this aristocrat? Chapter 1762. Qin Xingxing rolled her eyes at him. I don't believe that a painter from hundreds of years ago has such a good imagination. Gu Xingyin watched the two of them bicker. She silently looked at the scene in the room. This place was actually very abnormal. Not just here. In fact, it should be said that from the beginning of the crystal stairs, everything was very abnormal. There was no doubt that this was an ancient castle that had existed for hundreds or even thousands of years. Moreover, looking at the appearance of the first and second floors, it was impossible for anyone to come here. Then, how did those crystal stairs remain untouched after thousands of years? Where did those lights come from? How could there be lights hundreds of years ago? What was even more ridiculous were those flowers with dew on them. What kind of flowers could not rot after thousands of years? The situation in the room above was the same as on the stairs. The carpet was clean, the chairs and tea sets were not even a trace of dust. The oil paintings seemed to have just been hung up. All of this seemed to have been frozen in time at the most beautiful moment. The problem now was that Gu Xingyin knew that there was a problem everywhere, but she did not feel any danger. She also did not feel anything wrong. Moreover, from this room, except for the stairs below, there was no exit or door. There was only a living room and a small bathroom. There was not even a bedroom. No matter how she looked at it, it was very strange. The others were obviously not fools. However, after Gu Xingyin said it out loud, no one dared to touch anything inside even though they were elated. Gu Xingyin looked around and said, I can't see through the mystery of this. Everyone, don't touch anything inside. We'll stay here for 10 days and go out when the time is up. This was the safest way. The others nodded. They sat at the top of the crystal steps and slowly waited for time to pass. The happiest thing was that there was a bathroom. God knew how long they had been holding it in. However, they were still a little scared. Even going to the bathroom was a private matter, in pairs. No one knew what would happen if they were alone. Just like that, 3 days passed by peacefully. Everyone was already very familiar with this place, and their hearts relaxed. There was really no danger, and the velvet carpet was quite comfortable to sleep on. That night, Gu Xingyin, who was sleeping soundly, suddenly woke up in a daze. There was no night here, and the room was always as bright as day. Gu Xingyin could only confirm that it was night by looking at the time on her watch. She stood up in a daze and wanted to go to the bathroom. Unexpectedly, Qin Gu, who was sleeping in front of her, suddenly turned over, and Gu Xingyin's feet tripped over. Gu Xingyin lost his balance for a moment and fell straight to the ground. She knocked her forehead on the mahogany coffee table in front of her. So painful. Gu Xingyin only felt a severe headache accompanied by dizziness. She could not help but groan. The others were also awakened by the commotion. Qin Gu was the first to wake up. Seeing Gu Xingyin's appearance, he hurriedly helped her up. I'm sorry, Ling Shi, I didn't expect. Qin Gu was very embarrassed. Gu Xingyin waved her hand. She could only blame her bad luck. She did not notice that her blood stained the mahogany furniture and actually slowly seeped into it. Chapter 1763. Gu Xingyin got herself some clean water to wipe her wound. There was no disinfectant or clean cotton balls. She could only hope that there wouldn't be any stubborn bacteria on this 1,000-year-old mahogany furniture. She felt someone shake her from behind and couldn't help but say, Qin Gu, don't shake me. Qin Ji's inexplicable voice came out, I didn't shake you. Gu Xingyin's heart tightened. Then, not only her, but everyone else also felt the shaking. It wasn't people who were shaking, but the ground. What? What is going on? Is there an earthquake? The white-collar man, Li Chang, said. Gu Xingyin, even if you used your toes to think, you would know that there couldn't be such a thing as an earthquake. The ground shook so much that they could only hold hands and stick close to each other to avoid being separated. In a place they couldn't see, on the first floor. The malicious spirits that had scared the 6 of them half to death were now cowering in a corner, shivering. The entire hall was filled with the sound of ghosts howling. Those malicious spirits felt that a powerful force was slowly awakening. That power, these ghosts felt that the owner of that power could easily kill them with just a thought. A few of the more powerful ones, led by the female statue ghost, who even had a trace of consciousness, were gathered together to discuss in a low voice. This power. Could it be the legendary Duke? The old woman holding the crowbar said slowly. After she said this, a look of fear appeared on the pale faces of the ghosts. They all disappeared into the darkness. Hopefully, this wasn't true. Second floor. The old woman was already kneeling on the ground, kowtowing in the direction of the stairs at the end of the corridor. She had actually lost a lot of her memories, but she had an instinctive respect and fear for this power. The only ones who were calm were the 6 people who didn't know anything. The sound of the ground shaking slowly stopped. Everything returned to normal. Qin Xingxing heaved a sigh of relief and raised her head. It finally stopped. I was worried that if this place collapsed and we fell down to the first floor. Her voice was stuck in her throat. Not only her, but everyone was shocked by the scene in front of them. The earthquake just now seemed to have turned on some unknown switch. The entire room had undergone a huge change. The room that was originally surrounded by walls had a window. They could see the clear sky and white soft clouds outside. If they remembered correctly, the sky of this ancient castle had always been gray. They couldn't even see the sun. Where did the blue sky and white clouds come from? What was most inconceivable was that on the wall opposite them, several doors appeared. Doors. There was a handle made of golden copper on them. They didn't doubt that they could open the door with a slight twist. Then, they saw something brand new. This, Qin Xingxing swallowed her saliva. What kind of place have we come to? No one answered her. No one could answer this question. Even Gu Xingyin didn't know. At this moment, everyone was shocked to find that the door suddenly turned. That door moved on its own without anyone else moving. There was only one explanation: there was someone on the other side of the door. Everyone held their breaths. Chapter 1764. Gu Xingyin noticed that someone had grabbed her sleeve. She didn't turn around to see who it was, because she was also nervous. The door opened quietly. A pair of black boots appeared in front of everyone. They looked up. Her long and slender legs were wrapped in tight dark-colored trousers. Above her knees, there was a purple shirt quietly hanging down. Looking up, there was a set of clothes with a very strange design. Looking up, there was a set of clothes with a very strange design. Looking up. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't because this pale-faced man had a handsome face that seemed to gather the spirit energy of heaven and earth. But, everyone couldn't help but turn to look at the oil painting on the wall. This person looked exactly the same as the person in the oil painting. Did a 1,000-year-old ghost come back to life? The man's gaze swept across everyone, and then accurately stopped on Gu Xingyin. Then, he slowly smiled. Qin Xingxing only felt her body heat up, and then something flowed down her nose. She subconsciously reached out to touch it. Blood. She actually had a nosebleed from looking at a man's smile. Qin Xingxing felt that she was quite useless, but this man was really beautiful. Then, Qin Xingxing only felt her eyes blur, and that extremely impactful handsome face appeared in front of her. How much of an impact would such an enlarged extreme beauty have on a person who was obsessed with looks? Qin Xingxing couldn't answer. Because she felt that she was having difficulty breathing, and the nosebleed seemed to be faster. However, this beauty didn't look at her. Everyone stared blankly as this strangely handsome man blinked his eyes and appeared beside them as if he had teleported, and then, he half knelt in front of Leng Shi, and a dreamy gentle smile appeared on his face. I've finally waited for you, my bride. Everyone, what kind of strange development was this? They all looked at Gu Xingyin strangely. However, Gu Xingyin couldn't answer them. Because she herself was also dumbfounded. She tried to call the system. System, can you explain? Actually, the moment the man appeared, she sensed a familiar soul aura from him. She knew that this man was her lover, but she couldn't understand what kind of script this was. Bride? Who would call someone a bride the moment they met? What if she didn't come? Would he still call someone else his bride? The system did not answer her. Then, the mysterious man tilted his head and suddenly asked in a soft voice, "Are you talking to someone?" "My bride?" Gu Xingyin felt a chill in his heart. This was the first time she had met someone who could sense the existence of the system. Although this man looked very mysterious, strange, and powerful, it was hard for Gu Xingyin to feel nervous when he was surrounded by the familiar lotus fragrance. She looked at the man calmly. "Who are you? I've never seen you, and I'm not your bride. Are you sure you didn't recognize the wrong person?" The man's lips curled into a smile. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but follow him. This man was simply too good-looking. Especially when he smiled, whether it was the corners of his lips, his eyes, or the tips of his brows, they all seemed to carry a trace of indescribable charm. People couldn't help but follow and yearn for it. And fall for it. Chapter 1765. The man obviously noticed Gu Xingyin's gaze. She was fascinated by him. Accepting this knowledge, the man's smile became even more joyful. He reached out his fair and slender fingers and gently touched the scar on Gu Xingyin's left forehead. Gu Xingyin could feel the slight coolness of his fingers. It didn't hurt when he touched the wound. Instead, it was very comfortable. She couldn't see it, but the others could clearly see that after the mysterious man put his fingers on Leng Shi's wound and gently rubbed it twice, the wound that was originally bruised and swollen had miraculously disappeared. The man was very tall. Even if he was half kneeling, he still looked taller than the others. He bent down and stared at Gu Xingyin. "How can I mistake my bride? From the beginning to the end, there will be no one but you." The others sitting by the side, they felt that they were a little redundant standing here. Gu Xingyin tilted her head and avoided his fingers. It wasn't because she didn't like it, but because she felt the cold touch on her forehead itchy. However, the man's eyes darkened because of her avoidance. She seemed to be rejecting him. Gu Xingyin stared at him seriously and asked, "I still don't know who you are." The man glanced at her and then glanced at the others sitting on the ground. He said in a low voice, "Get up and tidy up, my bride. You're in such a sorry state now." Gu Xingyin was embarrassed when she heard this. Leng Shi and the others came from the city to this castle. After a day and night of escaping in a sorry state, they obviously didn't look very good at the moment. If people were in a situation where they had to worry about their own safety at all times, they naturally wouldn't think more. But now, it was obvious that they were out of danger. Hearing the man's words, Gu Xingyin also felt a little uncomfortable with the sticky feeling on her body. She asked bluntly, "Do you have a bathroom and a change of clothes here? I want to take a shower." The others couldn't help but sweat for her when they heard her words. This mysterious man who suddenly appeared was obviously very powerful. They didn't even know who he was. How dare Leng Shi order him around so confidently? What if she annoyed him? However, no one could understand Gu Xingyin's confidence. She knew that what they were worried about wouldn't happen. Sure enough, hearing Gu Xingyin's words, the man's expression obviously became happy. Of course. This castle has always been prepared for its mistress. He stood up first, then bent down and reached out his hand to Gu Xingyin. Gu hesitated for a moment. She wondered if she needed to be more reserved. Then, she raised her head and met the man's mysterious eyes that were as dark as violets. He had been waiting for her hand. Gu Xingyin blinked. Without much hesitation, he succumbed to her beauty. They were an old couple. To hell with being reserved. Under everyone's gaze, the mysterious man personally held Gu Xingyin's hand and walked into the room on the far left. Looking at the two of them leaving hand in hand, Qin Xingxing clutched her chest and said faintly, "I feel like I'm a little redundant." The others also nodded in agreement. Chapter 1766. To be honest, looking at the way the two of them interacted, it was impossible to tell that they had just met for the first time. Zhang Chao frowned worriedly. Are we just going to let Lingshi leave? Will anything happen to her? Shuewan rolled her eyes at him and said, what are you men's eyes for? Didn't you see the way that handsome guy looked at Lingshi? It was so gentle that he wanted to give the whole world to her. Would such a person hurt Lingshi? Besides, Shuewan complained, even if he really wants to harm Lingshi, if it's someone Lingshi can't handle, do you think it'll be of any use even if we follow? Zhang Chao. He was speechless. In the room, Gu Xingyin followed the man in and realized that it was a huge bedroom. The room was also covered with a thick purple velvet carpet, and even the curtains were purple. Looking at the man's dark purple robe, Gu Xingyin had a certain understanding of the man's preferences. She slowly looked around the bedroom. As someone who had once owned a castle, she had a good eye and could tell that the style of this bedroom was extremely luxurious. Fortunately, the owner of the bedroom had good taste. Although it was luxurious, it didn't feel tacky at all. However, no matter how she looked at it, it didn't look like an ownerless bedroom. She raised her head and voiced her doubts. From what I see, this bedroom doesn't look like a guest room. Guest room? The man asked. He smiled and shook his head. How can my bride go to the guest room? This is my master bedroom, of course, he smiled teasingly. This is also your master bedroom. Gu Xingyin was calm in the face of such blatant flirting. After knowing the location of the bathroom and confirming that she could use it, she mercilessly kicked him out. I'm going to take a shower now. Get out. She didn't hesitate to ask him to leave. Since he said that this was her master bedroom, she could use her rights as the mistress. The man wasn't angry at all. He walked out of the bedroom cooperatively and closed the door for Gu Xingyin considerately. Gu Xingyin watched him walk out before she turned around and smiled. Outside the door. After he stepped out of the door, the man's expression changed instantly. In front of outsiders, he restrained his affectionate gentleness, and his expression carried a trace of indifference. Dear guests who have come from afar, that is the guest room of the castle. There is a change of clothes inside. You can go and freshen up. As he spoke, he pointed in a certain direction. Then, following his movements, the entire wall on the other side suddenly extended out, and a magnificent corridor appeared in front of everyone. On both sides of the corridor were identical rooms. In everyone's eyes, this scene was completely like an audit. However, after experiencing what had happened on the first two floors, everyone was traumatized by the existence of the corridor. The five of them looked at each other, but no one dared to take a step forward. The man tilted his head and looked at them in confusion. He suddenly looked at Qinggu, who was closest to him. Qinggu felt his mind go blank. In just a moment, he felt as if everything in his mind had been seen by someone. Chapter 1767. It was at this moment that the man understood why they didn't move. He frowned slightly. If anyone who knew him was here, they would know that the Violet Duke never showed his emotions on his face. Frowning like this was already a sign of extreme anger. He was indeed angry. But not because of these people, but because of the foul atmosphere downstairs. He had only slept for a short 1,000 years, and these cats and dogs dared to come to his place and behave atrociously. What he couldn't stand most was not that they were behaving atrociously here, but because they had frightened Gu Xingyin. He was going to deal with them directly, but then an idea formed in his mind. Qinggu was looking at him in horror. He could feel that in that moment, everything in his mind had been seen by the man in front of him. This was simply too terrifying. What kind of existence was he? Of course, the man couldn't answer him. He just said, "You don't have to be afraid here. In this world, no one can hurt my guests." He didn't say it loudly, but the confidence in his words was very strong. Everyone looked at each other. In the end, Qin Xingxing was the first to stand up and thank him. Then she pulled Shuewan into the first room closest to the hall. The other three men looked at each other and decisively entered the same room. They definitely didn't have the courage to enter a room alone. In the whole living room, only the man was left sitting there quietly. Above his head was the painting of a white horse with a bow. Contrasting with the painting, he actually had the illusion that he had traveled through time. However, he did travel through time. At this moment, he suddenly thought of something. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile, and his figure instantly disappeared on the spot. When he reappeared, he was already in the bedroom. He gently knocked on the bathroom door, and his soft and deep voice directly entered Gu Xingyin's ears. "My beautiful bride, I think you may need my help at this moment." The bathroom was silent for a moment. Then, the door was opened from the inside. Gu Xingyin stood at the door with a towel wrapped around his body. Hot steam seeped out of the bathroom. She looked at the man and didn't ask him how he knew she was thinking about him. She just said, "I didn't take the clothes, and I don't know where the clothes you prepared for me are." The man's eyes fell on her exposed shoulders, and his eyes darkened for a moment. He smiled gently and said, "Come with me." He led Gu Xingyin to a gorgeous wardrobe and pulled it open. In an instant, a pile of clothes appeared in front of Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin could clearly see that the wardrobe was divided into two distinct sections from the middle. It was obvious that one section was for men and the other for women. However, their styles were all gorgeous and flamboyant, just like the man in front of her. A beautiful wardrobe had always been a woman's favorite. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. The man tilted his head and smiled at her. "This wardrobe has been waiting for its mistress for thousands of years." He reached out and picked out a set of clothes for Gu Xingyin. "I'll go out first." "Take your time to change," he said as he tapped Gu Xingyin's forehead. Chapter 1768. Gu Xingyin felt that something suddenly appeared in her mind. She looked at the man in front of her emotionally, as if she didn't expect him to be so considerate. The man reached out his hand to cover her eyes and whispered in her ear, "Don't look at me like that." Gu Xingyin didn't understand, and then she heard the next sentence, "I can't help it." Gu Xingyin, the trace of emotion that had just risen disappeared without a trace. She only felt a soft and cold touch on her forehead. Of course, she knew what it was. Then the hand on her eyes was released, and she couldn't see the man when she looked up again. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but smile and whisper, "Why did you run away after kissing me?" The man sitting in the living room suddenly showed a helpless smile. "You can't wrong me. If I didn't run away, you might not be able to get out tonight." Gu Xingyin found that the man took out a complete set of clothes, and there were even undergarments inside. After exclaiming his thoughtfulness again, she slowly picked up the clothes and put them on one by one. "That's right." The man just touched her eyebrows to tell her how to put on these clothes. After finally putting them on, Gu Xingyin looked at herself in the huge carved dressing mirror in the bedroom. At a glance, she understood the man's trick, the style, the color, and the material. It was exactly the same as the man's. It was really. Gu Xingyin held her forehead and laughed first. "Such a strong and arrogant lover, it's really, very tempting." She gently pushed the door open and walked out. The man sitting in the living room immediately looked at her. Seeing him looking at her without blinking, Gu Xingyin walked to him and turned around. "What's wrong? Don't I look good?" The next moment, her waist was held by a pair of strong arms, and she fell into the arms full of cold fragrance. The man gently buried his head in her fair and beautiful neck. He took a deep breath and murmured, "I'm sorry, but I'm sorry." "No, it's very beautiful. So beautiful that I regret it." Gu Xingyin was a little confused. Regret? She wanted to raise her head, but the man used force on the male lead. "Yes, regret. Such a beautiful sure, of course, should only be seen by me alone." His soft and gentle voice was like the prelude played by the most elegant cello. It could easily make people sink into it. Gu Xingyin allowed herself to sink into it. When the other 5 people finished washing up and walked out of the room, the first thing they saw was this: the slender man and woman were hugging each other like a pair of tangled mandarin ducks. Qin Xingxing whispered, "Did we appear at the wrong time?" When she said this, she felt a little depressed. She recognized that the man was that mysterious and powerful handsome man, but she had never seen the woman before. This beauty was clearly calling Lengshi his bride earlier, but it had only been a short while, and he was already hugging another woman. Sure enough, men were creatures that could not be trusted at all. At this moment, Qin Xingxing had completely forgotten that there was no other woman in this castle. Then, she saw the man and woman separate and look over. Qin Xingxing. That was actually Lengshi. Chapter 1769. Not only Qin Xingxing, but everyone's eyes widened as they stared at Gu Xingyin, who was standing beside the man in purple. After being together for so long, they all knew that Lengshi was very beautiful. She was not the kind of beauty that would make you think that this woman was not bad looking at first glance. Instead, she was the kind of beauty that would make you fall into a daze and be infinitely surprised that you could actually see such a beautiful person in real life other than on the big screen. However, even though they all admitted that Lengshi was a beauty, at this moment, when they saw Lengshi standing there elegantly in a classical Western palace dress, they were still shocked. She was actually so beautiful. Moreover, she clearly had the facial features of an Asian, but when she wore this dress, it actually looked so harmonious on her. The dark purple dress was fitted neatly on Gu Xingyin's body. The size was so perfect that it was as if it was specially made for her. The sleeves and edges of the dress were outlined with exquisite patterns with golden threads. The hemline of the dress poured down like flowing water on the ground, charming and enchanting. Qin Xingxing covered her mouth with her hand. Such a dress was probably every woman's lifelong dream, right? The man standing beside Gu Xingyin was a little displeased. He frowned as he looked at those people who were dazed by Gu Xingyin's beauty, and his eyes darkened for a moment. He did not like these people looking at his bride with such eyes. He wanted to hide her. It was best for such beauty to only be seen by himself. The man held Gu Xingyin's arm possessively and looked at the others. I already know the ins and outs of everyone here. Do you need me to send you out now? He did not reject these people, but he did not like them very much either. Since they came with Shirshir, he would send them out properly. Out? When everyone heard these two words, their hearts were filled with endless excitement. When they came with the mentality of adventure and curiosity. But after coming, they only had one goal left in their hearts, to get out alive. And now, there was someone who casually said that he could send them out. Of course they were willing. Everyone's eyes lit up almost instantly. They looked at the man as if he was a god. The man probably already knew their answer. He nodded. Then I'll send you out. Wait. Qin Xingxing suddenly mustered up the courage to speak. She looked at this extremely handsome man and suddenly pointed at Gu Xingyin. Sister Lengshi, aren't you coming with us? When everyone heard her words, they realized that Gu Xingyin wasn't included in the everyone the man mentioned. If it was before they came here, perhaps they would be overjoyed that they could be saved and would not care about others at all. But now, things were different. In their hearts, if it weren't for Gu Xingyin, they wouldn't have made it here alive. Not to mention, there was still a chance to leave this place alive. Therefore, they could not abandon Gu Xingyin and go out alone at this time. Zhang Chao said, the six of us came together. Of course, we will leave together. The others nodded as well. Gu Xingyin's heart warmed when she saw this. It was a great feeling to see his kindness being reciprocated in kind. She glanced at the man and suddenly said with a smile, you can leave first. Don't worry about me. I'll be fine here. Chapter 1770. Hearing Gu Xingyin's words, everyone looked like they wanted to say something. They didn't expect that the man didn't say anything, but Lengshi did. Looking at the long dress she was wearing, which was obviously the same as the mysterious man's, everyone felt like they were being lovey-dovey. At the same time, they were also guessing in their hearts. Could it be that this man was right? Lengshi was his destined bride? For someone like Qin Xingxing, who had a rich imagination, she had already imagined an unparalleled love from her previous life. The man's eyelids trembled. He didn't say anything and waved his hand. Before anyone could react, they found that their line of sight had shifted. When they came back to their senses, they found themselves outside the castle. Their backpacks and food were on the ground beside them. Qin Xingxing stared at herself in a daze, then looked at the people around her. She then looked at the ghost castle in the distance, which was still shrouded in dark clouds. She pinched herself hard, still in disbelief. I'm out? The pain from her body told her that this wasn't a dream. Qin Gu, who was standing beside her, couldn't help but smile. That's right, we're really out. Ah! Qin Xingxing suddenly screamed in excitement, and then threw herself onto Qin Ji's body. She hugged him and shouted, "We're out. We're out of that damned place alive."